Ariana, if you'd like to read the instructions, please.
Welcome to our virtual meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Members, if you are able, please activate your video for purposes of quorum and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. All panelists, that is alders and staff, have the ability to mute and unmute themselves. Panelists can also rename themselves if they wish to add pronouns after their name. Please do not alter the naming convention otherwise. Also, please continue to use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak. The name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the council, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Ariana, could you please move Bill Sullivan into a panelist role? He's with the city.
Sure, I just moved him over.
Thank you. Hey, my voice lasted what? 2 minutes there? Something like that? We'll give it a go. Okay, I was just checking to make sure. Excuse me, we didn't have anybody else in attendees. Okay, Aiden, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Juliana Bennett. MGR Govindarajan.
Here.
Dina Nina Martinez Rutherford.
Present.
Barbara Harrington McKinney. Ann Kovich.
Here.
Robbie Weber.
Here.
Denise Jess.
Present.
Pepe Barros is excused for tonight. Darren Wozniewski.
Did I hear a here? I don't see him. Do you see him, Aiden?
No, I don't see him right now.
Okay.
Chris McCahill.
Here.
Nikki Vandermeulen, I believe, is excused. Bill Bremer. And Harold Kleems.
Yep.
There were Zoom updates tonight, so it's possible that people are still updating. It took me quite a while to get Zoom updated today. Here's Bill. Okay. So it looks like we have people excused, Bill. So you would be able to. Nikki's excused and Pepe's excused, so you would be able to vote tonight. So. Okay, and just a reminder that we have a public hearing at 6 o'clock. So whatever we might be doing at that point, we'll table that and move to the public hearing and then move back to whatever we were working on at that moment. So, and here's Darren. Anybody else join? Okay, did people have an opportunity to look at the minutes from last time? Chris?
Move approval of the minutes.
There's a motion, Robbie?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, seeing no hands, I'll assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, the motion is carried. Do we have any public comment for items not on the agenda tonight?
We do. We have one person registered to speak, Ramsey Adam Lee of St. Croix Heights, Hudson, Wisconsin.
Okay. Do we have that person?
Don't believe I
I'm
see.
not, yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say the same thing. I don't
Okay.
see him in the attendee list. I don't think.
There's a hand up there on a phone number. Is that Ramsey?
So I'm not sure. I just checked the registrant list and that phone number is also not registered, but I can go ahead and let them talk if you'd like.
Let's see if that's who is registered.
Okay.
Chris, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, while you're doing that, it looks like the way Bill's gesturing, he cannot hear.
Oh. Bill, are you?
Hello, this is Ramsey. I think I'm the one that's registered to speak.
You are registered to speak?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh.
You have 3 minutes.
This is Ramsey from Hudson, Wisconsin. First of all, thank you to the committee for the hard work. I have several people in Madison I know, but I'm a private citizen with cerebral palsy, and I was just wondering if the city of Madison can put some more accessible pedestrian symbol signals up for the visually impaired. I know there's a lot of people that are visually impaired that work in the city of Madison, and I have aspirations of moving there someday. But I was wondering if there could be some more accessible pedestrian signals put up for safety and to decrease accidents. This would be helpful for the visually impaired when they walk across the street. And I just want to make sure everybody can safely walk across the street. And I know Madison has a long-standing commitment to accessibility and accessible pedestrian signals. So I was wondering if that some more can be put up around the city because they've done it in San Francisco, and I think that works pretty well. So thank you for your time and commitment to accessibility. Madison's a great city, and I look forward to being there someday. Thanks.
Thank you you very much, Ramsey, for coming and speaking with us this evening. Do any commissioners or alders have any questions for Ramsey? Harold, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Ramsey, for coming and speaking to us. I just wanted to make sure I understood what you were asking for. I think I heard you say you were requesting more accessible pedestrian crossings, especially for people with visual disabilities. Is that correct?
Yeah, man. Is the yeah, because those of you that know me know that I visit Madison a lot, and I have a lot of friends that are either blind or visually impaired. So my understanding is these pedestrian signals talk and audibly give them the signals to cars that would help everybody. And there's a couple of streets that I would suggest that they be on, but I'm doing this for the good of everybody. Thank you. Does that answer your question, too?
Yes, thanks for clarifying. And I think if you have specific locations that you have in mind, it might be worth reaching out to city staff and let them know about that. Thank you.
I believe Denise has had some contact with Ramsey. Denise, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Ramsey, thanks so much for coming tonight and speaking on behalf of Accessible Pedestrian Signals. It's really appreciated. Yeah, Ramsey sent a message to me today. He sent one yesterday. I let him know that I'm on the Transportation Commission. He sent one today to Rebecca Hoyt, and I, with a couple of specific street intersections, Cedar and Park was one, and then another one. I don't remember off the top of my head. So I forwarded that message on to Renee Calloway so that city staff could look at that. And I also shared Renee's email address with Ramsey, and then encouraged Ramsey, if he had friends that were Madison residents, to reach out to city staff with those specific locations. So we were also hearing from residents.
Thank you, Denise.
Yeah, and I think the other street was 0.5 by the McDonald's, but I'll have them reach out to city staff. I'm just trying to help everybody because I know this was successful in San Francisco, and I would like to see it in Wisconsin. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much for caring enough to come and for connecting with Denise. And Denise, thank you for connecting him up with Renee and Rebecca. And does anybody else? Harold, your hand is up. Did you have anything else? Nope. Do you want me to take it down? Okay, there we go. Does anybody have any other comments or questions for Ramsey? Okay, thanks so much for coming tonight. I'm sure that Renee will be in contact with you, and we will work on that's one of the things under the Safe Streets Madison program that we certainly want to be paying attention to, and we appreciate your input. Do we have anybody else, Aiden?
No, we do not.
Okay. Any disclosures or recusals this evening? Okay, seeing no hands. Okay, we have items 2 through 5 recommended or proposed for the consent agenda. Aiden, do we have anybody registered to speak on items 2 through 5
No, we do not.
or registered at all?
The next person's registered for item 8 currently.
Okay, thank you. So, and I'm sure we have some for 9 as well. Okay, did everybody have a chance to look at items 2 through 4? And apologies, we just received the body of the legislation for item number 2 today. So it was fairly administrative, and I thought had some very worthwhile changes in it. So did anybody wish to have any of those items separated? Harold?
We separate item 5, 80.074.
Sure. That was a toss-up. We suspected that somebody might want to talk about that one. So, all right. So we'll separate item number 5. Does anybody else have a suggestion for separating any other items? Okay, then we're proposing item 2, Legistar 79865, which are amendments related to the transfer of the parking enforcement and supervision from the police department to the Department of Transportation Parking Division. Item number 3, Legistar 79973, which is amending various ordinances related to changing the title of the city traffic engineer to the Director of Traffic Engineering, and to update the title of the parking division manager where necessary. And item 4, Legistar 80073, related to vacating and discontinuing multiple unimproved public street right-of-ways within the plat of the University Research Park, as noted in that long title. Robbie?
Move approval.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second? Harold? Okay, there's a motion and a second. I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. Okay, Bill's having computer problems. Ariana, do you recommend that he sign off and sign back in again?
Yeah, let's try that.
Yeah, he's having trouble hearing.
Yeah, let's have him try signing out and coming back in. Sometimes all you have to do is shut down and restart. So maybe that could be a start there.
Okay. And sometimes with those Zoom updates, we have to go out and come back in again in order to have that work. Okay, so we will go on to item number 5. Do we have Chris with us? There's Chris. Chris, you want to give it just a brief little update, or do we want to just go right to Harold's questions?
I was actually going to, this is Aaron Canton with City Engineering. I was going to take the lead from Chris on just giving a little intro.
Okay,
I think
that sounds good. Go ahead, Aaron.
Chris is also here if needed. So I'm going to go share my screen. Can you confirm you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
All right. Yep. So this is the John Nolan Drive and Broome Street intersection. You had previously seen and approved geometry for John Nolan Drive, including the Causeway and the North Shore Drive intersection. And I believe you had seen some preliminary plans for the Broome Street intersection. At that time, when we were last here for John Nolan, it was not a part of the scope for this project. Recently, it has been added to the scope. And so we are seeking full approval from the Transportation Commission for the Broome Street intersection. And pretty similar to what you would have seen previously on this, converting the kind of funky intersection, T intersection, into a more typical T intersection without the center median and the more or less continuous travel along the northbound side of John Nolan Drive. And as was shown before, a new path along the north side of John Nolan along Brittingham Park, and then an improved crossing across Broome Street to access the almost complete Broome Street multi-use path project that's going on right now, and then an improved crossing across John Nolan Drive. So some zoomed in exhibits showing some dimensioning, starting on the north, angling somewhat and widening the shared use path across the railroad tracks, and then having a kind of a more standard type 2 curb ramp at this corner, tightening this corner up as much as possible while still accommodating movements. You know, you can see also fitting in the railroad gate arms and apparatuses. See if I think the next one has a little bit more crossing distances, show 47 feet and 41 feet of these crossings. This is going to be a 12-foot wide crossing. I'm sorry, this will be closer to a 10-foot wide crossing, while the one across John Nolan Drive is going to be quite a bit wider at 19 feet wide, anticipating that crossing to become quite a bit more used, you know, once the Broome Street improvements are made and once this intersection is improved, and that crossing is a lot easier than it is today. And then one thing I'll mention is we kind of are just showing a baseline on this side. You know, I know that at the North Shore crossing, queuing is an issue here. So we definitely expect to monkey around with this corner a little bit and make sure we're maximizing pavement and queuing space for people coming on and off the path. And then I'll also just mention kind of tying in on the southerly side of Broome here, tying into existing sidewalk, but widening through the railroad crossing to 10 feet where it merges into the new shared use path on that side. I think that's kind of covers the gist of it. I'm sure there's some specific questions.
Okay, Harold, I know you have questions. Go ahead.
Yes, raising my hand. Yeah, thanks for this. This looks really nice. This is going to be so much better than what was there before. I just had, I think, 2 or maybe 3 questions. The little jiggle in the bike path at I guess that's the south side of John Nolan Drive. I think right now that's all straight. And so that jiggle, is that to avoid trees or to get that extra queuing space, or? Yes, where you're.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good question. I don't know, Chris, do you recall if it was trees or shoreline?
Yeah, I think they were. I'm not sure, but we can certainly straighten that out if that's the idea. I think, you know, if we move forward with the proposed underpass in between Broome and North Shore, that would kind of that might change the geometry a little bit too of this path. So, but we could certainly straighten that out, I think.
Okay. Yeah, and that's a great transition to my next question. Yeah, now that we have funding approved for the underpass, at least the local part of it, is there anything about the design that may need to change if we do build the underpass? Like, for example, I'm thinking about the north side path, which is now pretty close to the roadway, which makes a whole lot of sense. But then I'm thinking, like, once we get to where the underpass would come out, like, yeah, just making sure that what we're building will be compatible with what's being proposed in the master plan or what we're thinking for potential underpass designs.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think we might still tweak the alignment of both paths on either side. The curbs are, I think the curbs are pretty well set with regards to a future underpass. The grades are, we might want to look at tweaking the alignment of the two paths. So, we have, some design money proposed in our 2024 budget to start looking to that in greater detail, and certainly can make those adjustments before this goes out for bid.
Okay, great. Yeah, I was thinking even, I don't know if there ever was discussion of putting the path on the other side of the railroad, because I feel like if you put the path further away from the road, then that allows you to have a better approach to a potential underpass. So that might just be something to look into. And we already have that 10-foot crossing there.
That does, we have looked into that a little bit, and we will continue to look into that. It does add a huge another level of complexity to it. Obviously, getting a new railroad bridge underneath, or a path underneath the railroad, but that'll be part of the scope of the money that we've proposed in the 24 budget to kind of look at them both, and then decide on alignment and then start to work on the design of that.
Okay, great. And then final thing, and I know that's not really the scope of what we're approving today. I really love the 19-foot wide crossing. I think there's the potential. I mean, the way it's drawn here, it looks like it's going to be a combined bike ped crossing. I feel if we have this much space, it makes sense to separate people walking and biking, just like we do, say, at Regent, Monroe, to like actually mark that out. But I know that's like down the road and we have the space to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can look at that. It gets a little tricky sometimes at the crosswalks, because some people don't want to go the same direction, and then they cross each other, and it gets a I think staff kind of came to the conclusion that there were so many different combinations on North Shore that we decided it might be better to not separate them, because they would be crossing each other quite a bit at the pinch points, at the what we call the keystone of the intersection. But we can, that's something we can still kind of work out.
Yeah, fair point. Okay, cool. That's all I had. As I said, looks great. I am very much looking forward to this actually being built at some point.
Thanks, Harold. Darren, go ahead.
Thanks, Ann. Thanks, Aaron. I'm liking the design. My question is always, I zoom in all the time on lane widths, and always asking the question, particularly on Broome Street, are we at the narrowest possible lane width that we can get there? I see 10-foot lanes along other sections, and then I see 13 and 11 foot on Broome Street. So is there a reason why they're as wide as they are?
Yeah, I can take a stab at that first. So I will say that almost not looking at lane widths, but pretty much the curb to curb width on Broome especially is as tight as it can be, while still accommodating the larger trucks that will at some point make those turns. And especially key here is there's going to be a lot of railroad gates and lights, and we can't have a truck making that turn and spilling over. I know maybe a lot of intersections you can have that kind of spillover, but here they would take out these quite expensive, dangerous railroad equipment. So we went back and forth quite a bit and tightened all the curb lines up as much as possible. And I think, that kind of set the curb lines where they were. And then there was some extra space in some of those outer lanes, 13 and 14 feet. I think we could certainly add in markings to mark it as a more of a 11-foot lane. But know that we need that curb to curb space here to make those turns work.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I mean, if it's possible, actually, you know, at the end here, I don't know how much, you know, high speed traffic you'd get that it'd be worth it. I was just always wondering the thought process. So I appreciate you sharing why they are the way they are.
Thanks, Darren. Robbie, go ahead.
Thank you. So I guess I'm just double checking that anyone who is coming down Wilson from the west of Broome Street or Doty west of Broome Street, is the idea that they will transition over to the east side to that path in order to cross instead of using the road crossing. I mean, right now it's kind of terrifying, but you can get across. I mean, you can bike down Broome from the north, but it looks like here you're going to need to get onto the path in order to make the crossing of John Nolan Drive. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that is definitely the easiest option in this design. You know, it's obviously like there's some benefit if the path, you know, on Broome we're on the westerly side, but with a pretty high wall here, that design led it to being on this side, and the crossing on here as well. I don't know if someone from TE, maybe if Renee is on, wants to talk about potential of kind of some sort of like shared lanes on Broome going south.
I think the folks coming from the west would actually cross at Bassett, I believe, because we're going to have a Bassett connection to this path.
Oh, we are.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. All right.
A
All
little
right.
bit off of the sheet, but you could do what you said and cross Broome, but I think most people coming from Bassett would just stay on Bassett and cross the railroad there, get on our path and get on our new path and do that.
Oh, okay. Okay. Because right now there isn't a connection from
Correct.
Bassett. Yeah.
There will be with this one, with this new path. Yeah.
Right. Well, that probably
just
makes it a lot easier, I think. I just wanted to be sure because right now, if you're coming down Bassett, you have to go over to Broome to get across. And
with Jim's two-way cycle track, that'll be a lot easier now as well. Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to check what the options were there. Thank you. And would you just remind me, since we've put in so much infrastructure, I've forgotten a little bit, how far north does that two-way cycle track extend on Broome?
Yes,
I think it's Dayton.
this phase of the project goes to Main Street. So what's under
Main Street,
construction right now will go to Main Street to the Bike Boulevard. And then at some point in the future, it could be extended further. But this project that is kind of getting hopefully towards the end will get us to Main Street.
Okay. So it'll provide a connection to both Wilson and Doty and Main, so that people can get on it and easily cross John Nolan. Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Robbie. Alder Govindarajan, go ahead.
Thank you. This question might be a little bit out of scope, but the bike path on the north side of the of John Nolan Drive, close to the Wisconsin and Southern Railroad, are there going to be any fences between the bike path and the railroad? Just because when you're biking and there might be like a pedestrian or whatever it might be, you might go in there, fall or whatever. I wouldn't want that happening into the railroad necessarily.
That's a good question. In fact, I think the railroad has requested that fence from us. So it's possible that a fence gets included in between the railroad and the path, or possibly on the other side of the railroad. They were more concerned about park users wanting to get to the path and crossing the rail. So, my understanding is either one are acceptable to them, but if we do have to put one up, and if folks would prefer one on one side or the other, that would be helpful to know.
I think if it comes up to that discussion, definitely having it between the bike path and the railroad would be the safer option. Thank you for considering it.
Thank you, Alder, for bringing that up. Other comments or questions on that particular issue or topic, or thoughts for Chris? Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, just voicing my preference for either no fence, and if we do a fence on the other side of the railroad, just because the fence will take out some of the usable width. It might interfere with snow clearing and all of that. And I think there's plenty of space between the path and the railroad that it's not really a safety problem that if somebody were to crash. So my preference would be to put it on the other side if we have to build one at all.
Thanks, Harold. Other comments or questions? Okay, any other comments on item 5? We would need a motion. Harold?
I would move approval of the design.
Darren?
Second.
Did you wish to speak to your motion, Harold?
Oh, thanks.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote, unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing no hands, the motion is carried. Ariana, Bill Bremer is still saying he's tried everything, but he has no sound. The audio phone numbers don't work either on his cell phone. So what suggestions do you have for Bill? Do you have...
Sorry, you said you tried to call in?
Yeah. Do you, Aiden, can you send Bill a message and include Ariana in it so that she has his email address? He's emailing me and I'm not, all I'm doing is, acting in between here. So can you send Bill a message and include her in it so that she can help him figure out some other alternatives? That would be great. Thank you so much. Okay, we are at 5:37. So we're waiting till 6 o'clock for the public hearing. So that at this point, I would like to go to, unless there are any objections, I'd like to move on to item 7, approval of the Metro Transit Network redesign refinements, understanding that if we get to 6 o'clock, we might need to pause and go to the public hearing and then come back to the Metro Transit. So Jesse, did you wish to start?
Yeah, thanks, Anne. For those of you that don't know me, I am Jessie Stammer. I am the communications manager here at Metro Transit, and I am filling the big shoes of Mick Roosh today. He is at an APTA conference, so he's on his way back now, but you're stuck with me tonight. So,
well, today. We're not stuck. We welcome you. So,
all right, good. Thank you. I'm here today as well with Sean Hedgepeth, the planning manager, to once again go over the proposed changes for December and just answer any questions that you all have coming from the public hearing and just making sure you're making the right decision here. So before Sean gets started, just a quick recap from the customer service side of things. We've received a lot of feedback, but I can very much condense all that feedback into 2 sentences. We are continuing to just hear that buses are chronically late. Buses are overloaded and overflowing during peak period times, and that our data is unreliable at this point. And so these changes that we're proposing for December kind of all aim at just making our service more reliable. That's kind of just a very easy, simple summary and to what Sean's going to get into here. So Sean, if you want to take it away.
Sure, yeah. I have kind of the same PowerPoint that I've been showing throughout the process here. Today is for the vote. I do have some new information. So here we go. I'll give you a little recap of some really recent information I have. I have some pretty good news for that. So I have 8% here because I wanted to make sure that I got that into the packet deadline. We've actually had some issues with our data, as many people know. It's actually closer to 13 and 13% increase, and it might even be more than that depending on some missing data we have. As most people can see anecdotally, the UW session has very much stressed our existing buses, and we've had to add extras where we can. Sometimes these extras are a little confusing for people because they don't go the whole route. So there's kind of been a back and forth about what happens. The drivers tell people when they get on, there's different head signs. And we've also tried to change those based upon kind of setting expectations for folks. So we are working on our December schedules right now. As I'll get into later about a little bit more on the route level. There some of the guesses that we had to make. We were a little under resourced on some of these routes, and the ridership has just come back in a way that was much faster than we anticipated. So yeah, this is kind of going back towards what I've been mentioning the last couple of weeks. Route B, C, and 28 have been the most affected. There's a high ridership there. Route B has had to go through Washington. There's a lot of construction for Route A. We do things like we go to drop off only, and that says that the trip is canceled in certain apps. There's certain trips that are late, that they're so late that they're early for the next trip, and we're getting comments on that. We unfortunately just didn't have any service data to base our schedules on until the UW session started. So we've used basically September data to inform our new December schedules. And so that's going to account for some of the delays we're seeing, and most of which there is some traffic, and traffic's starting to get really bad again. But basically the riders, I mean, you can pull up to a stop, there's 50 people. It's going to take a while for everyone to get on, which was fine during the summer, but it's just completely overwhelmed us. So we're trying to make sure that folks know about other overlay routes. For example, there's Route D. You can also take Route 28. Route C, you could also take Route 38. That's been kind of a learning experience. A lot of people kind of figured out what route they want to take during the summer, and they weren't looking at some of these other routes. That's starting to change, and we're kind of filling up all of the buses, and people kind of understanding that certain routes overlay others, and you can take either or. But the good news is that we are making pullouts, which in transit speak means all the buses that are scheduled to go out are going out. There's a couple of cases here and there for some maintenance issues, or a couple of trips here and there getting canceled. But we are the other agencies. You can go to CTA in Chicago, plenty of other places where they're only providing 80% of the service that they have scheduled. So I think we're in a pretty good spot there. As we do think that more capacity is needed, and we're kind of waiting on drivers to do that. But we're not kind of biting off more than we can chew, and that's very important. So yeah, just the way that we're tracking some of these overloaded trips. So the drivers can call them into the radio dispatcher, and then those are all logged. We check those every day. There is a little bit of reporting bias where a driver has that overload trip every day and they just stop calling it in. So we realize that there's some bias there too, and so we check some of the other data sources we have. We also have an extra kind of capacity after we have these Dodger trips that go to MMSD high schools. So unfortunately, that doesn't really help during the peak of the peak. But since the bell time's over around 9 a.m., we can run those buses instead of running them back to the garage. We're turning them into short parts of routes and things, and that's really been helping. So it does tack on extra work to those school runs, and that's been a little bit controversial, I'd say. So yeah, I mean, just a little bit on hiring. We are having some large classes go through right now. Unfortunately, it's pretty unpredictable about how many of our drivers will retire in the next few months, and then how many people will make it through training. So it's a really kind of subjective about how many drivers we'll have in the future. But that being said, we're doing everything we can to, not give them something that they couldn't do. And some of that is just waiting for drivers. So some of the stuff that we'd like to do, we kind of have to phase in. And so yeah, this kind of gets more into some of the plans that I've talked about at other TC and public meetings. So the big one, we've been getting big complaints about at night and on weekends coming from the hospital, going up to the west side and places like Middleton. So we had this little Sunday only A Sheboygan shuttle that we were running for a while. That was always supposed to be a Band-Aid. And the real fix is we're going to Interline, which is the same bus of the C, turns into the R after 7 p.m. on weekdays and all day Sundays. So that's really going to provide a way for people. They used to have to connect over at Sheboygan, and that was a difficult thing to do, especially connecting to a bus that comes every only half hour. So now that this R will be running out, and I'll show you some maps of that later if you don't remember it from last time, that I think that's really going to help. And it also just provides capacity, period. And there were some efficiencies of combining those two routes that made that revenue neutral. So, and then the other big story for the weekdays is that Route 38 extension to Sheboygan has been extremely popular. It's actually getting almost a double the ridership now of Route 28, which that was flipped before the pandemic. We've also had tons of overloads on University Avenue in that area, and a lot of people just want, the direct service from Sheboygan like the old 2 and the 28 had. So we're going to go ahead and extend the 28 there. We just gotten so many comments about that, and that's going to help a lot of people that are looking for a bus in that area to the hospital. And also, yeah, some of the stuff we can't always shift some things around because there's some logistical issues, but we're trying as hard as we can to try to accommodate some of these hospital shifts. It's a very large employer. It's not something we can do for every job, but that's something that we're trying to do in the schedules as well. We did get some complaints about just missing people's hospital shifts, especially at night when we're not running as frequently. So yeah, this is just an example of the map. We have this kind of after 7 and weekend transfer that needed to be made over at Sheboygan and Eau Claire. That's still going to happen for the F in December, but for the R will continue there. And you basically, if you stay on the C, it goes around the hospital loop, that will turn into an R. And then I also have the 28 on this map going the whole way to Sheboygan, the same routing as Route 38. So this is kind of showing, this is a diagram of showing kind of what parts of the route has combined service. So the off-peak, there's kind of this gap in between Park Street and Sheboygan right now, especially on nights and Sundays when it's only running every 30 minutes. So basically, if you extend this R up to the end of the C, you'll have basically 15-minute service nights and weekends from Sheboygan to U-Bay, University Bay, where the hospital is. So I think, even if you don't work at the hospital, this also goes by Hilldale Mall. It's a very popular place to go. This helps that. So there'll be another option to either take the C and R, for example, to Hilldale Mall, or the combination of that, or the A. So this provides kind of a missing link, I would say, of frequency during weekends and nights. And then people will definitely have to check schedules. We try to not make the changes as stark as possible, but once we're changing the schedules to add more time, they do change. So that is something to check out. We're going to try to get out draft schedules as soon as we can. We have this issue of, part of me wants to work up to the last minute where we have more data to make better decisions, but we also have to get those schedules out there. They have to get pushed by our marketing team and just get them out there as soon as we can so we have enough time to print everything out. So yeah, as I mentioned, the Route R is getting extended to UW Hospital to the end of the C line. It'll be the same bus. Route 75, I can get into a little bit in the next slide. We've talked with Epic, and right now our start date is looking like the 13th of November. So this would actually be sooner than December, but it will go into the December materials, and so all the apps will push it through and things. So yeah, we're still kind of checking out and seeing what happens with some of these short turns that we're running during the peak with extra buses. What we found is that just really certain parts of routes that are extremely busy. What happens to you, like for example, in the morning you might get a seat because you're further out, but the people that are closer in have no chance to get a seat, and they're getting passed up a lot. So, kind of one of our solutions has been running these shorter routes. It is a balance because people have expectations that the routes go the full way. But one of the things that happened when we did the redesign is we have very long routes now, and we don't have any arbitrary breakpoints like with the transfer points where we used to run extra twos and then they would stop at the west transfer point. But now folks are expecting that route to go to the very end. So we have to balance kind of what expectations are. I think at some point we'll look at these routes and kind of normalize some of them instead of running them the way we are. So some of the things now are a little confusing, and we apologize for that. But part of it is that we wanted to use our flexibility of launching something immediately. If we start making new route numbers and publishing schedules and things, we'll need to go through a public process. So we kind of need more data for that to happen. So we hear everyone loud and clear, and we're trying to do things now that just might seem a little bit clumsy because we're still figuring things out. So yeah, this kind of gets into the Route 75 loop. So basically this is a little overlay that we're going to have 4 trips to Epic in the morning and 4 trips from Epic in the evening. This is a way for people who live in Southwest Madison to just have double the amount of service to Epic, or for folks in other places in the west side, even all the way up to the north side, if they'd like to transfer to the D2 and the E. And hopefully this takes a little bit of pressure off of people who want to take a route the whole way to the square, if some folks can get on over here. But the 75 going through Maple Grove and McKee has been a popular option, both for folks going to Epic and just people living in that neighborhood who want. It has been proven to be the fastest way to get downtown. So I think this will be popular, and we also have plans in the future to extend this to the end of the B, but we have to kind of wait on more drivers there. Yeah, and then this gets kind of into the minor things. I would definitely say people should check schedules. There'll be some routes that are untouched, but most of them are going to have some minor changes. And so we've had to adjust running times based upon data that we have. We're also trying to make all the connections that we possibly can. It's kind of mathematically impossible to make every single connection unless you have a really high frequency route. So we're doing the best we can based upon the feedback we're hearing and all the data we have. We're also finding some efficiencies in some cases to reallocate resources. For example, with the J and the O, there was ways that we could tie those two together. Like, for example, right now we have part of Route O that is kind of its own route. Now it's going to be connected to the J. So if you live in some of those areas where the O goes, that goes straight to the hospital. So that was something we were able to do. Just every single pick, driver pick where we implement these, we're going to find ways, better ways of running things. And sometimes it just takes data and experience to see. So yeah, there's some minor trip adjustments. I think some people are going to be pleasantly surprised where there are ways that we found efficiencies to squeeze out more trips. In some cases, those aren't trips to go the whole way, but I think some people will find use for them. And I just feel like we have to use the resources we can to provide as much service as we can. But that will change. Definitely, there's with regular commuters, they get used to the routes, and there might be some surprises for people. So I just want to make sure that the TC knows that. But just part of changing these schedules, some things have to change. Some things that might not work for the next pick. But there's just some catastrophic on-time performance issues that we really had to adjust. And then getting more into March. The great thing about March, we're going to have much better data that we can base some of these decisions on. So right now, we just closed out September. We're going to be able to get actually stop level data for September, so we can see kind of where people are getting on, which route, what time. That's really going to help us inform us going forward. And then we're really hoping that we have some empty driver positions. We have many drivers in training. And we're really hoping that some of these places where we just don't have enough capacity for the demand that we can help out on. So that will kind of be going into March. We still have a ton of lead time needed for that as well. So we're actually going to have to make some decisions there late January, and that's going to kind of be the final cutoff for the next March improvements. We're always a little bit behind. So I know everyone wants us to make changes really quickly. It's just we have a union contract. We have to wait for data, and we also have kind of a process needed to put all the stuff in and have it push through all our software and things. So that being said, I think all these are really positive improvements. I've been really impressed with how the riderships are coming back. It's a good problem to have, but we really need to adjust to kind of coming back to pre-pandemic times. There's tons of people and there's a lot of return to work, and people want to ride the bus, and that's great. But we're doing our best to make sure that they can.
Okay, thanks, Sean. We have about 5 minutes before the public hearing starts. So as was posted on the agenda, since we adjourned this item from the public hearing, there is no additional public testimony tonight. So we can go right to comments and questions. Harold.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. My question is, you pointed out the on-time performance issues and you focused on the A, B, and C, and that's where my understanding is you're actually adjusting the schedules to add some padding to improve on-time performance. I was wondering about the D, because that's another one of those long runs that goes through the isthmus. It doesn't go through campus, so maybe that helps with it. But how's the on-time performance with the D?
It can have some issues. We've actually, so kind of during the pandemic, a lot of travel times went flat. Like, for example, we had weekend service here that we just ran all week because we had flat travel times. That's not true anymore. We need to have a pretty creative schedule, honestly, to be able to handle some of the variability we have. The D, it doesn't need another bulk resource add, but we have moved around different time points and things in certain cases where basically it's just taking really long to get through the core of town. So in some cases where it could be running early on Monroe Street, it could be running early on Sherman. We're kind of just moving around time. So the D will change. It is in basically answering some of the on-time performance issues we've had. And so the D will change. It didn't need the level of resources that especially the B and the C needed.
Okay, thanks. I like that, because now with the new system where people just need to make more transfers, I think that's where really, from the rider experience perspective, these on-time performance issues, it's not that you're late to your destination, it's late that you're late to the point where you transfer and then you miss the bus that may be one of those 30 or 60-minute routes. So doing what we can to adjust that, I think that's the way to go. Thanks.
Okay, Alder Harrington McKinney, and then we'll go to the public hearing. Go ahead, Alder.
Okay, I'll be very quick. I was at the
take your time, Alder.
Okay, I was at the NRT meeting this morning, and there were several complaints about, of course, the on time, and so that was covered. But specifically, I want to address there were a couple of complaints that individuals had been waiting for a bus and they had been just passed by. And there were several complaints about that the bus driver just passed them up, which meant that they missed that bus, which meant that they missed the connection for their next bus. And so has there been any increase in complaints about that at all? And if that's the case, how are you addressing it?
Well, Jesse could tell you more, but that is a very serious issue. In some cases, we've had times where operations has made the determination that no one else can be in the bus, and it's a safety issue. Sometimes where the bus is so late that they've gone to drop off only. That is, it's not a solution that is a long-term one. But I can say that's a very serious issue. But we also have legal issues where they call it the white line in the front of the bus. If there's people standing right up to that, the bus cannot take any more passengers. And so in a lot of cases is we don't have the capacity to pick anyone up there. There also could be some issues where some driver missed someone. I highly recommend that people complain. Yeah, Jesse could talk about how we do passive complaints.
Yeah, just go ahead, Jesse.
I'll be super quick. Those are
it's okay. Well, people are on notice. We'll start the public hearing after we finish this particular comment. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ann. Those are overloads, what we call overloads, and those happen primarily during peak times. That's when we're seeing them right now, particularly in the downtown area or through our core isthmus. So that is happening too, and it's compounded with late buses. So you get something that's super late and you have more people waiting because they've been sitting there for a half hour and they all try to get on the bus at the same time. And then we have a bus that is literally at capacity and it has to pass people coming into the isthmus. So it's passing those passengers up that have already been waiting for a really long time. So when we will fix that by creating more accurate schedules. And so people aren't getting passed up as much and they know when to expect the bus coming, and our data improves, and kind of all of that is related into the same kind of category, if that makes sense. But it's one of our top complaints right now. The bus is late, the bus is overloaded, and I can't tell from my data whether it's coming or not. And all of those things are very much interlined.
Excellent. And so since that input did come from the NRT, and that's a population that's not often commenting, so that's very important. I wanted to drop that in. And also 75 is a very popular bus. I mean, I see people lined up to get on that 75. And so thank you very much. That was my input.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Okay, we will go to the public hearing now. Without objection, we'll move to the public hearing and then and table the discussion of the approval of the Metro Transit Network redesign refinements, and then we'll come back to them once we're finished with the item for the public hearing. And Ariana, did you see Bill's message that he's in the attendees and needs to be moved into the panelist?
Yes, I assume that he's the 630 number.
I see him. His name shows as Bill Bremer. He's the third one. There's 1, 2, 3, third one down.
I'm not see.
When I go into attendees, there's a phone number. William Bremer, right? Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right. Okay, so the public hearing is regarding the removal of RP3 parking from the 200 block of North Baldwin Street, which is East Johnson to East Dayton. The speakers will be allowed 3 minutes. Parking Division Manager Stephanie Cox will make a staff presentation regarding their recommendations to the Transportation Commission. And then following the public hearing, there'll be discussion, deliberation, and vote on this item. If we would decide to adjourn into the next meeting, there would be no additional testimony at that next meeting. So Stephanie, I'll open the public hearing and then we'll have the presentation by Stephanie.
I'm sorry, was there anybody for public hearing?
No, we're going to do your presentation first and then we'll hear it. Then we'll hear if there's any testimony.
Okay. All right, let me just share.
That way they can have the benefit of your presentation before they make their comments.
Great. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so the Parking Division was asked to conduct an analysis of the residential permit program on the 200 block of North Baldwin Street as part of a project for Safe Streets Madison program. The project would require the removal of 6 on-street residential permit parking spaces to allow for bike lanes on segments of North Baldwin, as shown in the map below. Just a little background on the residential permit program. It's in place to provide parking relief for residents living in areas impacted by commuter parking. A neighborhood can petition to have their street included in the program by requesting a study and having at least 50% of the residents in favor of the change. Our records show that this area of North Baldwin was added to the program in 1995, most likely by petition. This is a map of the removal locations. So the area that will be removed is down at the corner of Johnson and Baldwin. So there's 6 spaces down at the bottom of Baldwin. This will also remove 4 parking spaces on the 100 block of Baldwin, but those are not in the residential permit program. Those are just standard 2-hour parking spaces. So our findings, we found that the Area 17 zone offers approximately 50 parking spaces for permit holders, with the majority of spaces located on or near North Baldwin Street. Our records indicate that during the 2022-2023 permit season, we sold a total of 9 permits for Area 17. And as of current, we have sold 7 permits for this new permit season. And I just wanted to show a map of Area 17 and where all of the spaces are located. So there are permit parking spaces located on Mifflin and Baldwin. And those are the only 2 streets that have residential permit parking. So it is our recommendation to remove those 6 spaces along 200 North Baldwin, and then also the removal of the non-RP spaces on 100 North Baldwin, which is, those are just standard 2-hour spaces, pending the approval of the proposed bike lane. The bike lane design does not allow for parking, and we would not be able to accommodate it with the current parking plan.
Stephanie, if I could just clarify, you're talking about the actual approval of the plans and specs to the Board of Public Works, because this was approved by the Transportation Commission under the Safe Streets Madison project. Would that be correct?
Yes, yes, the final approval.
Sure. Okay, thanks. Thanks much. So before we go to discussion, we'll see if we have anybody registered to speak. Aiden,
No.
do we have anybody registered to speak on this item?
No, we do not.
Okay. So we will close the public hearing and go to discussion, deliberation, and vote. Who has questions for Stephanie? We've already talked about the project under the Safe Streets Madison program twice now. So additional questions with regard to the parking analysis? Chris.
Thanks, Stephanie. Just a straightforward clarifying question. When you say that the area offers 50 parking spaces, does that just mean like eligible households?
That means that if you put the average size vehicle on those streets, there's approximately 50 spaces available in those zones for vehicles.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Other comments or questions? Okay, if not, we would need a motion to approve the recommendation of the parking division manager. Harold.
So moved.
Darren.
Second.
Did you wish to speak to your thanks, Darren. Did you wish to speak to your motion, Harold?
No, thanks.
Okay. We've had a lot of discussion on this one already. Is there any discussion on the motion? Bill.
Can I vote?
Can't hear you, Bill. Can you speak up a little bit?
Can I vote?
Yes, you can.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Because Pepe is gone and Nikki is gone. So yes, you are eligible to vote. Okay, I'm seeing no hands for discussion. I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. If so, please raise your hand. Or if you wish a roll call vote. Okay, seeing no hands, the motion is carried. Okay, thanks. Thanks so much, Stephanie. So we will go back to the approval of the Metro Transit Network redesign refinements. And it sounds like, and Sean and Jesse will have to talk about if you need to make a decision in late January, we'll need to figure out when do we need to request a public hearing, when do we need to hold a public hearing, and sort of back into that late January so that we start getting that on the schedule. So maybe we can take that offline and so we're going to be back again in a very short period of time with some additional requests. So comments or questions? Harold.
Yeah, one additional question I have. To what extent have you been working with traffic engineering to potentially find fixes for, like, you know, if you have identified spots that just add delay to the trip, and like working with TE to see if signal phasing can be changed, if we can have temporary bus queue jumps or anything like that, because I think working at the root causes of the delays that are not just, you know, we don't have a good sense of how things are going or like how much demand there is. And some of it is related to construction. But yeah, I think that seems to me worth exploring if there's something that we can do to eliminate those slow spots.
Yeah, I know we have a queue jump on Milwaukee Street. I know Mike Chickball is our capital projects manager, and he talks with traffic engineering all the time. It's mostly to do with the BRT things, and I know that there are potential fixes coming through for north-south as well. But yeah, Yang Tao could probably.
Go ahead, Yang.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Harold, for that question. And yeah, thank you, Sean, for the answer. Yeah, Sean is absolutely correct. So we have been having actually monthly coalition meeting with Metro. So that's been going on, and we have been identifying a lot of improvements that we can do to help make bus more on time. Yeah, actually, I think just a couple weeks ago, we had some other conversations about things we can do. Yeah, we're going to. I'm also going to start a meeting very soon here with kind of Metro management, going through some things. So definitely, yeah, I think definitely there are things that we can tweak to help. One challenge I want to bring up is that I think this is also kind of a challenging time with all the constructions going on in the city. It's construction season. So that's been tough. And also, I think some of our residents are not familiar with the new routes. So it takes some time to get used to. But yeah, definitely, we've been collaborating on helping buses moving through our intersections more on time, not just by traffic signal timing, but by making sometimes by making other changes, like sometimes just simple like no parking changes, or sometimes queue jumps, or designate the bus lanes. So I think lots of things have been discussed.
Thank you. I'm very happy to hear that that's happening.
I also just want to add that we are taking driver feedback as well. So, and we're passing that along to Yang and his team. So for instance, like the left turn arrow is not long enough. We're not able to make that. Just very simple things like that. We have been sending and working with Yang and his team. They are probably sick of us at this point.
He says, no, they're not.
That's because he's nice, right?
Yes, he is. Other comments? Did you have more questions or comments, Harold? No? Okay. Any other comments or questions? Alder Rummel, I see you just turned your camera on. Did you have a question? No? Okay. You can leave it on. That's fine. We love to see you. All right. Any other comments or questions? If not, we would need a motion to approve this set of refinements, understanding we'll have another opportunity very soon to look at some additional adjustments. Darren,
I move to approve the submitted refinements for Metro.
okay, there's a motion. Chris?
Yeah, I second.
Okay, a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Did you wish to speak to your motion, Darren?
No, thank you.
Okay. Is there further discussion? Okay, I am going to assume a unanimous consent vote, unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, and Jesse and Sean will have to connect up with Mick and everybody and get on the schedule for TC meetings so that we can start working in order to have a decision by the end of January for the next round of adjustments. So,
Okay.
All right, great. Thanks so much.
Thank you all. Have a nice evening.
Thanks, you too. Okay, next, and Aiden, I believe we have people registered to speak on both items 8 and 9. Am I correct?
Yep, you're correct.
Okay, so what we'll do first is go to the presentation. I somehow just messed up. There we go. I lost seeing you for a minute there. I did something to my computer. You're back now, though. So we'll have a presentation first from, I believe, Steve and Chris, and possibly Renee, and I know Yang's here too, to talk about Harvey Street. And once we have the presentation, then we'll hear from the public, and then we will have our opportunity to discuss. So, Chris, Steve, I'm not sure who's going to lead off.
I'll just do a quick intro, and Steve's going to have a quick presentation. But just wanted to kind of do a quick overview to remind everybody where we are in the process with this project. So we did have a reconstruct project planned for 2 blocks of Harvey, and or maybe just 1 block of Harvey, 1 block of Harvey, 1 block of Schmidt, and that was approved already. We had our PIM and PIM board approval, TC approval on that section in blue that Steve's showing. With coordination with adjacent development, we decided to hold off on the project until the spring of 24, and in that time, we considered adding a missing sidewalk piece that was part of a recommendation from the neighborhood association, as well as in our city plans. So right now, what we're here to talk about is this proposed sidewalk addition to the project, and Steve will kind of get into the details of that.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Okay, good. And you can see my screen, I see. So
we can, yes.
Okay, good. As Chris said, we do have an approved project for the Harvey Schmidt reconstruction. Originally, we came to transportation with this too. So we're reconstructing Harvey Street from Ridge Street to Schmidt Place, and Schmidt Place from University Avenue to Harvey Street. The green, or the blue box goes a little beyond Schmidt Place because there's a good stretch of Harvey Street from Schmidt to probably the third lot, start of the third lot, that's in pretty rough shape. So we're going to do a mill and overlay there as well. So since the project was delayed due to coordination issues with the redevelopment on Schmidt Place and the University Avenue project, we decided to pursue sidewalk installation on on Harvey Place, basically from Schmidt Place all the way to Blackhawk. So we had a PIM last week, Wednesday, and we presented at the PIM I'll kind of go through the PowerPoint just really quickly to try and give you a recap. The intent was, since we had the delay in the project, we'd like to install new sidewalk on the north side of Harvey Street from Schmidt Place to North Blackhawk, which was basically the north side from Schmidt Place to Blackhawk in the red and a little bit of the blue. And there was some missing sidewalk from Hill Street to Blackhawk. There's 3 or 4 lots on this stretch that do not have sidewalk on the south side. We did substantial design we've met with forestry and had field meetings, and we tried to do everything we could to design this to not take down several of the trees. So the picture you see on your screen, these are existing trees that are staying in place. And the intent with our design is to have a 9-foot terrace to allow ample room for planting trees in the future. Since we had the PIM meeting where we presented sidewalk on both sections of Harvey Street, we also had a field meeting with the neighborhood yesterday, and a lot of concern came up regarding the tree canopy, especially. So I'm kind of just the tree canopy, and I'm going to skip over to show you, kind of give you an idea. Oh no, I can't zoom. Oh, there it is. So originally, the original plan did have sidewalk installed on the entire north side of Schmidt, on Harvey, just west of Schmidt. And after the field review yesterday and a meeting with forestry, we did some additional probing on some of the big trees. So at the intersection of Harvey and Schmidt, there's 5 very large trees.
Harvey and Eugenia.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Right here. And the tree on the north side on Eugenia wasn't going to be impacted by the design, but for the 4 at the corner of Eugenia and Harvey, all were proposed to come down. And they're very large trees. I mean, on the south side, a 30-inch linden, a 27-inch Norway maple, and on the north side, there was I believe a 47-inch silver maple, a 31-inch oak, and a 39-inch silver maple. That we were going to save the oak, but we were going to take down the rest of the trees. Okay. So since that meeting yesterday, we tweaked our design. We decided to remove the sidewalk from the south to try and preserve these trees and the tree canopy. So I know people that are registered to vote are probably ecstatic to see that with further discussion and further review, our new proposal is sidewalk on the north side of the street only. We redesigned it yesterday to save the silver maple, which would be at the northeast section of Eugenia, where we relocated the sidewalk kind of where my mouse is, to try and save that 47-inch maple at 702 Eugenia. We did additional probing with forestry and found an area where we think if we move the sidewalk closer to the curb, there's a good chance we can save that tree. Now, we're going to put in the specs for this project to do some root inspection using the air hammer. So we'll do further inspection to try and preserve these trees as much as possible. But our new design now is to only install sidewalk on the north side, redesigned it to save both the silver maples and the oak tree. And I'm going to skip over. Shoot. Okay. I got to zoom out a little bit. So originally, we had a lot more trees coming out with this project. And now with the redesign and removing the connection on the south side of Harvey. And I do want to let you know one more thing about this connection on Harvey Street. the farthest we can go on the south side of Harvey Street is to Hill Street. The park frontage starts at essentially Hill Street. All along, so you can see the forested area with no houses on it. That's a park, Quarry Park, and it's really steep grades, and the trees go right up to the curb. And we had the same issue when we were designing Harvey Street for the portion of the reconstruct from Ridge to Schmidt Place. Very steep terraces on the south side of Harvey Street, and a lot of retaining walls and stuff, large trees that we didn't want to disturb. So the decision was made to not even include sidewalk on the south side of Harvey. So I just wanted to let you know that the connection from Hill to Blackhawk can only go as far as Hill. We cannot continue the south side without substantial tree removal and substantial retaining wall installation. Therefore, we thought, after meeting with Jim and Chris yesterday, after the field meeting, we felt it was the best to pursue the sidewalk on the north side, save as many trees as possible, do a redesign, and move forward. And that's what we're presenting with you today is just the sidewalk installation on the north side only, and saving as many trees as possible. The trees that are coming out, there's a large stump here that was removed several years ago that we'll take out. There's two pine trees, and I think I'm sorry about jumping around, spruce trees. So the label's on the bottom corner. So those are two fairly unhealthy spruce trees at the corner of Blackhawk and Harvey, and then it's just a brush pile at the corner to get that sidewalk in. So no substantial tree loss, no substantial canopy loss, and I think the neighborhood will be much happier seeing this. So what we'd like to show you today is our proposal that we're going to take to the board for approval to install the sidewalk from Schmidt Place all the way to Blackhawk. And I kind of skipped through the PowerPoint, but kind of explained to you, I think this was a better explanation of what we were going. And I'd be happy to go through the PowerPoint if you'd want, but I think you have a good understanding of where we're at and how we came to to only install sidewalk on the north side. Is that helpful, Chris, you think?
I just add one piece to keep in mind is where, the stretch from Blackhawk to Hill is in better shape. It's not due for reconstruction right now. And that's why we're kind of pursuing just this sidewalk extension. It wasn't part of the project originally. And there is opportunity, when this does come up for reconstruction, we can certainly take another look at the sidewalk on the south side, and if there's maybe some more, curb alignment changes that we could look at in the future. The other thing is maybe by the time this this does come up for reconstruction, perhaps there's a whole different tree situation at that point, and maybe in between there's maybe those trees only last 10 years or something, and then we could just do a smaller sidewalk segment on the south side. So we thought this was kind of a nice temporary solution to get that pedestrian connection that's shown in our plans as a priority sidewalk, but at the same time saving as many trees as possible.
Okay. If that's your presentation, then we will move to public testimony. Steve and Chris, are you good on your presentation for now?
Yeah, I think
okay. So. All right, why don't we go to public testimony, and with the changes that are proposed, perhaps that will address some of the concerns, but who do we have, Aiden?
So first we have Eric Gudeiron of Eugenia Avenue, opposes and wishes to speak.
Go ahead, Eric. Do we have Eric?
Yep, Eric just needs to unmute.
Are you there, Eric?
Yep. Okay. Sorry. Can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay. Yes. No. I'm very happy to hear the changes. Yes. I think a sidewalk on one side of the street is all that is needed. And so yes, I would voice my support for the plan as it now stands.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Eric? Okay, thank you very much. Who do we have next?
So next we have Catherine Taylor of North Blackhawk Avenue, opposes and wishes to speak.
Catherine, are you there?
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, hi, this is Catherine Taylor. Like Eric, I'm very happy to see the change that Steve proposed, and I want to thank him for taking into consideration all the comments from the neighborhood. I know a lot of our neighbors have been very concerned about the canopy loss that was part of the original proposal, so we are very happy to see this new redesign. Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome. Thanks for meeting with me.
Anybody have any questions for Catherine? Okay, who do we have next, Aiden?
Next we have Ulrich Dieterle of North Blackhawk Avenue, opposes and wishes to speak.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, again, Steve, thank you very much. I was at the meeting yesterday, at the neighborhood meeting, and I'm very happy to hear that we're not losing the trees that were initially targeted. Sounds better, much better. And I would like to make a comment, though, about trees in general. I think removing trees is also a health concern. It's not just a transportation concern. And it would be great if every time a project like this took place, that there would be some input, like a environmental health study to see how much oxygen we lose, how much carbon is then spewed through the atmosphere by removing those trees, how much heat is generated by the loss of those trees. So I would encourage either this commission or others to look at those aspects anytime a bank of trees are targeted for removal. And thanks again, Steve. This looks so much better.
You're welcome.
Okay, are there any questions for Ulrich? Okay, who do we have next, Aiden?
Next we have Dan Nuth of North Blackhawk Avenue, opposes and wishes to speak.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
I wanted to reiterate as well how pleased I am that our comments were taken into consideration, and thank Steve and his team for coming out in the field and having that meeting yesterday and listening to our concerns. And this looks so much better, and very happy to see we're going to keep our canopy and found a good solution to this. So thank you again, and thank you, Steve. I know we talked several times. This is great. So thank you.
Good. Glad you guys are happy. Now keep in mind, we're trying to save that 47-inch oak at the corner of 702 Eugenia. But after forestry reviews it, and does some trimming, if there's hollow spots, they may recommend taking it down. But at this time, in this design, we're proposing to save it. So there's a chance that once we start the tree trimming in the spring, that tree could be lost, but only due to, not due to the design, but due to the health of the tree. It has a lot of hollow spots on it that we noticed. So we're going to do everything to save them as much as we can, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Does anybody have any questions for Dan? Okay, Aiden, who do we have next?
So the remaining registrants do not wish to speak, but we have Elizabeth Kepicus of Harvey Street opposes and is available for questions. Amy Glassell of Eugenia Avenue opposes and is available for questions. And Liz Vowles of Eugenia Avenue neither supports nor opposes and does not wish to speak.
Okay. Thanks. Does anybody have any questions for the members of the public who registered but did not wish to speak, but were available for questions? Okay, I'm seeing no hands. So comments or questions from TC and alders who are present? Looks like there's been a lot of discussion with the public. It looks like we're making the connection that's in the plan. Denise, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. Thanks, Steve. I am just really grateful for the both and thinking that went into this. I think sometimes we are, in difficult places of pedestrian safety versus trees. And, I think we can continue to look at how do we create environments where it's pedestrian safety and trees. So thank you. And just really sounds like an engaged process with the, field meeting and public meeting. So just, kudos for that. And I'm really happy to hear that the residents who were here tonight feel good about this plan.
Thanks, Denise. Carl, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. My question is, so where the south side sidewalk on Harvey ends, which is basically like where the parking lot entrance to Whole Foods is there going to be an opportunity for people to safely cross there? I mean, I think right now people park, it's not well aligned. I'm not sure if there's a ramp, but I feel like that might be one of the improvements that we could make so that if people use the south side sidewalk, but it ends and so they have to get across.
Yep.
Facilitating that by maybe removing the parking by creating a good ramp would be good.
We did put a ramp in there. So if they do use the sidewalk on the south side, we're installing a new ramp. So it's kind of hard to see, but the bolder color is the new proposed sidewalk. So there is a new ramp getting installed at the corner of Hill and Harvey to utilize that existing sidewalk that is there and give them a safe crossing.
Right. I guess I was thinking about the other end of the sidewalk.
There's no sidewalk there.
Well, it ends mid-block, right?
No, it's so I zoomed in as far as
I think he's talking about east of here.
Oh, east.
No. Wait. Like where 3325 Harvey Street?
Yeah.
Like that's where the sidewalk currently ends, right?
Yeah, with Whole Foods going away, I'm going to reach out to Whole Foods and see if they even need this sidewalk right there. So they may have a new development going in there.
Yeah, I think we probably should. I mean, we could certainly look to do a mid-block crossing here, but perhaps with the new development that comes, I think this is going to close around December timeframe. maybe we could put a crossing here, but maybe it makes sense to wait till the development comes to see what that is. And, we could make that as part of the development agreement.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's fine. I mean, it's a short stretch, so it's not going to be heavily used, and there's a crossing on one side. So I think that makes sense to connect it to the development. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. I see an attendee has a hand up. We've gone through the public comment period, so this is really the opportunity for the members of the commission and alders to have their turn. So just so you know, there's not really another opportunity for additional comments from the public. Other comments or questions from Transportation Commission or alders? Carl, go ahead.
Sorry, I forgot about that. So in the public meeting presentation, you have the cross-section of the street for that, but it's my understanding, like, you're not going to do any reconstruction or changing anything to that part. It's going to be continued 6-foot parking on both sides, 2 9-foot lanes.
Correct.
Okay.
No geometric changes to the roadway. We're waiting for reconstruct before we do any geometric changes to the street itself.
Okay, thank you.
There is the opportunity to do a study and remove parking if need be, but at this time, we're going to keep parking as is.
Okay, other comments or questions from commissioners or alders? Alder Govindarajan, go ahead.
Thank you. If the parking was removed, even either on one side or both, what would replace that potentially?
Potentially could be a bike lane if parking was removed, but
we for the section that we are not reconstructing, there is, one side of parking would not be enough for, bike lane in each direction, maybe, but, that is something we could look at as what, what are the options there? That is a RP3 parking, I believe, and requires a hearing for that removal. So, that is something we could consider in the future, but we're not really we haven't notified folks of that at this point and studied that yet.
Yeah, I can just say it did come up at the meeting. There was one person who, it is a yield street, so biking, there can be a car coming, and a bike sometimes has to yield to the car as well as cars yielding to cars. I said, we can definitely add it to the Safe Streets Madison project list for connections. Obviously, if you remove the parking and there's not a reconstruction, it raises some questions about would we want traffic calming. It kind of turns into a bigger project at that point. So I think it's something that we can get onto the Safe Streets list to take a look at as a connection. And we'd want to collect some data to kind of see what's happening out there. And obviously right now with University Avenue under construction, what's happening might be a little bit different than what happens after it ends. And so it could be part of a Safe Streets Madison to look at the RP3 parking removal and how that might allow for some better bike connections. Or obviously at some point, this street probably would be reconstructed down the road as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Other comments or questions from commissioners or alders? Okay, are you looking for any kind of a motion from us, Chris and Steve? Or just feedback?
Just feedback, but if you felt strongly enough to do a motion, that never hurts.
So it sounds like the members of the public are satisfied. Robbie?
I'll make a motion to proceed with the project as presented tonight.
Okay, there's a motion to proceed with the project as presented tonight. Alder Martinez Rutherford, is that a second?
It is.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Did you wish to speak to your motion, Robbie?
Nope.
Okay. Alder Harrington McKinney, did you have some comment?
No, I was just late for the second.
Oh, okay, so that's a third. All right. Is there further discussion about the motion? A lot of great feedback. Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, before we vote, I want to make a brief comment. I am going to vote in favor of this. I think this is a fine plan, but I think it's good to remind people on the commission and members of the public is that we do have a strong commitment to a complete sidewalk network. And so, as we have discussed, the plan was to build sidewalks here because sidewalks are safety issues, sidewalks are an accessibility issue. And so it's really important to keep that overall in mind. And this is not to say that in some particular cases, such as this one, there are competing interests, such as preserving the tree cover, such as that because of topographic challenges along the park, we can't have a continuous sidewalk anyway. So I think this is a great plan, and I appreciate staff working with local residents. But yeah, let's keep in mind that our goal overall is to have a complete sidewalk network, and there are many areas of the city, unfortunately, where we do not have that yet. Thanks.
Yeah, I know it's a great reminder, Harold. Thank you. Other comments or questions or discussion? Okay, I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote. And the motion is to proceed with the project as presented tonight. So I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. If so, please raise your hand. Or if somebody wants a roll call vote. Okay, the motion is carried. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And great engagement, continuous engagement. Very much appreciated by everybody in the neighborhood and everybody on the commission as well. So thanks, Steve and Chris, for doing that. Okay, we will move on now to item number 9. And this is the Starkweather plat. And this is interesting because this is, Renee, our first, right?
Yes, this is the first plat coming using complete and green streets.
Yes, so a first for us. So Sean and Tim, are you going to make the presentation? I believe we have people registered to speak, so we will follow the same format. We will have the presentation from Sean and from Tim, and then we will hear from the public, and then we will have discussion and questions. So go ahead, Sean and Tim.
Yeah.
And maybe make sure we introduce ourselves, because I don't know, Tim, if you've been to the Transportation Commission before, have you?
No, I have not. Tim Parks with the Planning Division in Development Review and Plan Implementation.
Okay, and Sean, you've been here many times before, so welcome back.
Yep. And we also have Bill Sullivan from the fire department was able to make it. So there will likely be questions about fire access. So I'm glad to see he's here. Chris, I'm assuming will also be helping me out. He's here. You all know Chris. You all know Renee. So I will jump into it.
If I could just say, Bill, thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Glad to be here. All right. So, as Ann mentioned, this is the first plat under the Complete Green Streets. This is the Starkweather plat, which is located north of Milwaukee Street, just east of Fair Oaks Avenue. It's the Voigt Farm site. And today we're looking for feedback on the proposed cross sections as proposed by the developer. Many of the proposed cross sections that have been proposed by the developer are not in alignment with Complete Green Streets as they are opposed, and a lot of that's Reason is they are addressing aerial apparatus needs, aerial apparatus lane requirements on streets. So we just wanted to come here today to get some feedback on potential variance to the Complete Green Streets. We'll say that the development is choosing to use the streets for their aerial apparatus, and to address those needs. And I believe the development team is here to speak on that. So with that, I'll go into actually and create a very nice chart on the different streets and the I guess the deviations from what's in the Complete Green Streets. So I'll go through them pretty quickly. But if there's questions, let me know. I'll probably toggle back and forth in between the plan and the streets so that you can see what we're talking about.
Sean, we're gonna hold the questions until after we hear from the public. So we're gonna do presentation first.
Sure.
Yep. Then hear from the public, and then we'll have questions, because hearing from the public might impact those questions in the discussion.
Yep. Sorry, I usually don't have a lot of public speaking.
Sure.
So
No
thanks for
problem.
that.
Okay. Go ahead.
So I'll start with Leon Streets. As proposed by the cross sections. The development team, they're proposing 26-foot travelway and 8-foot parking. And a mixed-use neighborhood street. The Complete Green Street Guide dictates that 22-foot wide is the is the maximum width for the travelway. So they'd be seeking a variance there. Harding Street, we're in alignment with the development team on the right of way and the travelway. Walter Street, we're pretty close in alignment. Both neighborhood streets, travelway 2022. I think that's pretty good there. Chicago Avenue is another one, neighborhood streets where the development's seeking a width of 26 feet, and Complete Green Streets Guide calls for max of 22. Starkweather Street is another one where they're asking for 26-foot travelway, and the max on a neighborhood. Yield Street is 16, so quite a bit of variance would be needed there. And Voight Avenue is the same situation. So, and here are their cross sections: Chicago, Leon, Starkweather, Harding, Slow / Voight Street, and Walter. We can go back to these cross sections if there's questions, but here they are. And then this is their fire access plan that they're trying to address. So the blue crosshatch is their fire access route that has 20-foot width, and the pink crosshatch is the fire access route that has a 26-foot minimum width. And if you have questions about the fire access, like I said, Bill's here to be able to answer those questions better than I can. So that's kind of an overview of what we're looking for. I'm sure there'll be more questions, but now I'll turn it to Tim to kind of go over the process, because this is definitely relatively new territory for us with the Complete Green Streets and this being the first plat.
Thanks, Sean. Just a quick overview of why the questions are before the Transportation Commission tonight. As some of you probably know, subdivisions are typically reviewed by the Plan Commission and ultimately approved by the Common Council. They're governed by Section 16.23 of MGO, and We recently repealed and recreated 16.23 as one of the implementation steps following the adoption of Complete Green Streets earlier this year by the Common Council. So one of the things that staff was tasked with following the adoption of Complete Green Streets was amending the subdivision regulations to basically codify the Complete Green Streets policy and guide, make reference to it in the ordinance, give it some teeth, if you will, in terms of when property is subdivided, the streets in that, needing to comply with Complete Green Streets. As Sean mentioned, this is the first subdivision plat. And actually the subdivision was submitted prior to the council's adoption of the new subdivision regulations on July 25th. But they are asking thus far to proceed under the new ordinance and its references to Complete Green Streets and the policy and guide as a result of that. Prior to the amendment to the subdivision regulation and Complete Green Streets, street widths were specified in the subdivision regulations. There were not as many street types to choose from. Really looked at collector streets in one or two ways, local streets in one or two ways for the most part, and then higher order streets were also spelled out in terms of minimum right-of-way widths, and in certain cases how wide the streets would be. Complete Green Streets really kind of took that and broke it down, made it much more nuanced. And so questions that would not historically have been raised at this point in the subdivision process are on the table because of the nuance that Complete Green Streets introduced to the design of streets. Subdivision plats establish the right-of-way widths. And basically from a process standpoint, there are two types within the subdivision process. You have a preliminary plat, which is the level at which Starkweather is at right now. Preliminary plats are concept plats or plans for how land will be subdivided. And state statute basically says that if you get a preliminary plat approved, that a final plat that is in substantial conformance with that approved preliminary plat is entitled to approval. So the preliminary plat, while somewhat conceptual in nature, is also very specific, and it kind of sets forth what happens as we start to really nail down the subdivision of property, establishing the lots, establishing outlots, establishing right-of-way widths for streets. And so at a later point, Transportation Commission will probably see the design of the streets that'll actually be built in the Starkweather plat once we get to that point. But the right-of-way width will be established through the plat, and that starts with the preliminary plat. So that's where we are now. One of the things that the new subdivision regulations set forth is where someone is seeking to deviate from the Complete Green Streets policy and guide, that the Transportation Commission is requested to make a recommendation to the Plan Commission. The Plan Commission is the lead referral or the approving body for preliminary plats. The Common Council approves them by resolution after the Plan Commission, following most times the Plan Commission's recommendation. So that's kind of how transportation fits into this new subdivision review process. And whereas before the old subdivision regulations, as I mentioned, probably, were not as nuanced, and the decision on street widths was prescribed by the ordinance. We would look to neighborhood plans, the official map, to make sure that the streets were the correct size. And then once they were approved and ultimately built, we would then look at the end product in terms of buildings that would be built on those lots to determine if they complied with the fire code. We are kind of putting more thinking into the end product that's being contemplated for these lots. up front because now we need to know that the streets that we're platting will actually support all of the uses, including the ability to provide the necessary fire access as specified in MGO and the International Fire Code. So I can kind of stop there, and like Sean, I'll be happy to answer questions after the public hearing. Thanks.
Okay, why don't we move to any registrants that we have?
So first we have Therese Hansen of Mequon Avenue, Cedarburg, Wisconsin, supports and wishes to speak.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you. There's actually just a couple of us from the planning and development side who wanted to just give a little background on the development of the plat in front of us. Would it be possible for me to actually have my colleague Chris Socha present first, and then could you come back to me? Would that be okay?
Is there any objection? I'm fine with that. Any objection from anybody on the commission? Okay, why don't we switch the order, and understanding that you do have 3 minutes, and then the ability for the commissioners and alders to ask you questions. So do we want to go to that other person first, Aiden?
Sure. So Chris Socha of Mequon Avenue, Cedarburg, Wisconsin, supports and wishes to speak.
Thank you. Good evening to everybody, commissioners, and thanks for letting us get the order right here. My name's Chris Socha. I'm a partner and architect at Kubala Washako Architects. We serve as the design lead to Starkweather, the development team that's bringing this proposal forward. Teresa is one of my colleagues, and she will follow my comments. And I'm hoping we can have Starkweather then follow Teresa. I believe we either have Helen Bradbury or Rich Arneson joining us tonight to have that final speaking role. So I'm going to set the table. Teresa is going to talk a little details, and Starkweather will talk about the implications of the topic at hand. And I'm going to try and do my part in this 3 minutes here. So flying up just for a moment, I think just want to acknowledge what a interesting, unique, and complicated project this is. It's fully 60 acres, the entire parcel. What we're not seeing is the 20 or 30 acres that are just north of here that will eventually become a public park. So we have about 30 acres of development site here. And we are 1.5 years into this project, where we've been working very closely with the community and very closely with city departments. So what drew us to this project is the outcome. How do we create a really special new neighborhood in the city of Madison? And so we set 5 tenets at the outset of this, and one being this community must be vibrant, walkable as a true neighborhood. 2, the creation of place here really needs to create community and connection, both within the neighborhood and to its surroundings. 3, ecological restoration plays a really important role, as I noted too, and kind of everything that surrounds here, including the creek and restoring what was quarry land into a much more robust ecological setting. 4th, sustainability, really how we set this plat up. It keeps in mind how buildings face the sun, how these future buildings can really take advantage of sustainable building practices. And then finally, public access. We feel very strongly that the ability for everyone in Madison, folks in this neighborhood and adjacent, can access the creek, access this as a place, and access the eventual park. And so with those 5, pretty lofty goals in front of us, we set to reconcile really the nuts and bolts around this. Number one, in 2018, there was a Milwaukee Street Special Area Plan adopted, and that plan really advocated for residential housing density and a mix of uses. And we're very much in line with the desire to fulfill that piece of the special area plan. And so we work closely again with city staff and community to set up a zoning type that supports that work. Alongside that, the complete Green Street guidelines sort of were, I don't know if I could qualify it in its infancy, but certainly in its draft form, that process was really paralleling the start of our design work. And so we eagerly looked to the new guidelines to allow us to create streets that behave differently. Because if this is going to be a walkable, vibrant community, the streets have to be designed to facilitate that. So we were really happy about that piece of this, and so we worked with city to kind of understand what that meant. Applied those practices in creating really unique streets here. You'll see each one is kind of a unique response to site conditions and connections to adjacent city fabric. Now, what we realized as we got into this deeper is that reconciling the complete street guideline with fire access was challenging, because really at the heart of it, we're trying to support a dense development that works to the housing crisis. So I'll stop there, and I'm going to hand it over to Therese, who will keep the story going.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you very much. Does anybody have a question for Chris before we pass on to Therese? Or we could hold the questions and ask them for the whole team at the end of. Anybody have any questions at this point? We'll have an opportunity for questions after we hear from Therese and either Helen or Rich, I think it was, from the applicants team. Okay, go ahead, Therese, excuse me.
Great, thank you. And yes, as Chris noted, I'm Therese Hansen. I'm an architect with TKWA, part of the planning team for this preliminary plat. I wanted to just note that we were really looking to the Complete Green Streets guidelines throughout the development over the past year. We've been really keeping an eye on those as those evolved to help establish this really vibrant, walkable public realm that we're seeking for this plat. While the final guidelines weren't yet released, we were really looking to those for guidance throughout the last year to help us set dimensions for terraces, sidewalks, the like. You may have noted that on the submitted street sections, we were referencing those typologies of the mixed-use neighborhood street, neighborhood yield street, and the civic street, as we were really inspired by those for the character that we were seeking. We really envisioned those three north-south streets, Leon, Harding, and Walter, as being really key streets to knit this development into the existing neighborhood and avoid the perception of creating some kind of private development zone. We want this to feel like this really inviting neighborhood that's just knit into the existing fabric. All of those east-west streets, those three new streets, really are serving unique roles. So Chicago being really this main new access point at the north side of the development to this proposed parkland, which would be north of the site. That Starkweather Street is really at the sort of the heart of this development and is anchored by two gathering areas. We've seen that as being at the greatest density of the site, having ample terraces, wide sidewalks, creating a great outdoor room. And then our southernmost east-west street, we've called it Slow Street, we've called it Voigt Street. It needs a new name, but we're looking to that as offering sort of varying terraces and sidewalks and having a much more slow character and being near some of our townhouse zoning. So throughout our iterative feedback with the city, it was noted that the vision for this development includes buildings more than 3 stories tall. We need to provide travel lanes wide enough to allow for fire truck aerial apparatus, which is 26 feet. And so maybe you've seen on the submitted street sections and plat materials that we were really taking care to provide those 26-foot travel lanes were only necessitated by the designated building heights within the development. So where our zoning density involves lower building heights or where we've provided sufficient aerial apparatus coverage on some of the other streets, we've proposed some narrower streets. So I think as you may have seen on that chart, that's why some of those travel lanes weren't 26 feet wide, because we think we've provided ample coverage with those other streets. And so we didn't do that holistically. We believe these streets we've designed really achieve an important balance between the intent of the Complete Green Streets while still supporting that need for fire truck access to some of these 3, 4, and 5-story buildings that are envisioned here. So while we know that these deviate from the ordinance and that a variance would be necessary to move forward, we're particularly interested and appreciative of your feedback towards the likelihood of a variance approval if we seek one for our submitted designs. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. And in order to keep along this same track, could we hear from the applicants now? Aiden, would that be Helen and or Rich? Would that be correct, from Starkweather LLC?
Yep. They're the next 2 registrants anyways.
Okay, that'd be great. Thanks.
So Helen Bradbury of East Washington Avenue neither supports nor opposes and wishes to speak.
Hi, thank you. I will turn my 3 minutes over to Rich in a minute. I just want to hope that you understand that we have attempted to make compromise maybe between Complete Green Streets for purposes of creating the 1,000 units of much needed housing in Madison and the aerial apparatus that we feel we'll need for buildings that are 3 stories. So we're available to answer questions, and I'll turn it over to Rich.
Okay, well, you can't really pass your time along, but let's see. Yeah,
Okay.
let's see how that goes. Rich?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Aiden, go ahead.
So we have Richard Arneson of East Washington Avenue, neither supports nor opposes and wishes to speak.
Thank you. I'm not going to take 3 minutes, but I'll just kind of reiterate a little bit of what's been said. And we've spent a lot of time and money developing this plat. We've got, if you see the parcels on the right side of the plat, those are all affordable housing, including some owner occupied by Habitat for Humanity, Madison Area Community Land Trust, and then another nonprofit developer for the bottom. In addition, we're planning on doing our own Section 42 project on the site, and then the rest will be market rate housing. And it's an important development. It's a great location, and the way this is being, I guess, presented to us is we're supposed to comply with the new Complete Green Streets, but if we do that, it's going to shift the risk onto the developer for future conditional use permits and to figure out fire access and fire safety down the road. So that's just not, we can't take that risk with a $20 million development to say, hey, we'll figure out fire access, we'll do these narrow streets and figure out fire access later. I mean, we would love to have narrower streets if we didn't have to provide aerial access. We don't want wide streets, but we have to do what we have to do to comply with the fire access so that we can build the buildings that we want to do and not be, relegated to 2-story buildings potentially in the future. So we're very eager to I guess get your response to the likelihood of a variance, because it will affect how and if we move forward with this project. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions so is that everybody from the development team?
Yes.
Okay, so let's take any comments or questions for the development team from the commissioners all together. Anybody have a question? Chris, go ahead.
Thanks. I'm not sure who this is for, but the question basically is, from a design perspective, and how you envision the streets working, would your preference be for these 26-foot aerial access streets to be
with solar access? And so we have east-west oriented development sites. And so as such, we look to those east-west streets to provide the aerial apparatus to the longest dimensions of those buildings. And so we liked the orientation of the east-west streets, providing that aerial coverage, as it gave not holistic coverage to these buildings, but ample coverage to at least the longest dimensions. There also includes Leon Street, but you can see off to the west there for those western parcels, again, trying to hit those longest dimensions. Thank you.
That answer your question, Chris?
I'd like to clarify, actually. I'm really curious, regardless of what the fire department says is the best approach to aerial access, from the design of how these streets as spaces are envisioned, would it be better for those east-west streets to be narrow?
I mean, Chris, if you wanted to, I see your hand is up. You're certainly go ahead and answer. These questions are aimed at Therese, Chris, Helen, or Rich. So anybody who wants to hop in and answer, go ahead.
Hi, Ann. This is Chris Socha again. If you can hear me, okay.
Yes.
Wonderful. Yeah, Chris, to answer your question, where we started from a design perspective is how do we create place, right? How do we think about this as a neighborhood that is supported by a diverse street typology? And so from a development perspective, really the mixed use heart of this project is what we're calling Starkweather and Leon. So it's that middle east-west street intersecting, with that pair of buildings that you see frames of public space. And this was a really critical design move because what we're reconciling all these different demands on the projects. One is sort of development density, height, and area. How do we respect kind of the lower scale neighborhood that is south of us? How do we appropriately address Milwaukee Street? And so everything's sort of crafted with that in mind. And so the wider street on Leon and Starkweather, I think, we're in support of. That Starkweather Street is really a main corridor. And we saw that as having a unique opportunity from a landscape perspective to kind of bring some of the ecological character of the site into the street design itself. So what that street has as proposed is wide terraces where we can do, interesting things with landscape and really facilitate kind of this, main east-west corridor that has barbell ends that are public spaces. The streets that happen in between, we really love that Harding is a yield flow, slow street. That's going to be a quiet street. It doesn't have commercial use on it. It's really primarily residential. Walter effectively keeps the same street section, more or less, running north-south through it. And then the remaining east-west streets, what we called Slow Street on the south, originally that was thought of as almost being like a shared environment or a curbless street. We had to compromise and do what you see here, but we worked creatively to sort of find solutions where you'll see like the curb sort of weaves in and out in terms of where parking and loading happen. So the aim here was to always, when we needed a wider street section, use things like curb placement, bike lanes, et cetera, to sort of narrow the feel of these streets so they actually behave differently. So I could go on, but hopefully that starts to get to what you're asking.
That was super helpful. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Other questions for this group? Okay, I'm seeing no hands. I guess I would ask if the four of you would stay with us in case there might be questions that come up later. Alder Rummel, did you have a question? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I heard at least two of the applicants talk about a compromise. I guess I want to make sure it's clear what happens if a variance is not, what are the options on the table? And maybe Sean at the beginning outlined them and I wasn't clued in enough, but maybe now is a chance to kind of revisit either from staff and from the applicant's point of view. Thanks.
Sure, and I think Alder we'll hear from staff because we have somebody from the fire department. So once we get through the rest of the public testimony, I think we can come back and understand from staff what alternatives might be. But also ask that that Therese, Chris, Helen, and Rich stay around so that if we have questions later, we could certainly revisit a discussion with them. But please address Alder Rummel's question if you would, Therese, Chris, Helen, or Rich, whoever would be most appropriate. I think you're asking what would happen if we don't approve the variance.
And I might suggest that Rich or Helen take this one, but I think that before they do, just the heart of it is we've worked really hard to find this solution that got ahead of the green streets, but also allowed for the density that's being asked for by the city through the special area plan. And frankly, the density that is required to make a development of this complexity really work. And so when you boil it all down, I think from the development side, it's really challenging to live with the uncertainty and the implications of having to kind of parcel by parcel seek fire access variance, it inhibits how you think about selling the sites. There could be cost implications to that. So it, as Rich alluded to, it puts a lot of risk on the developer and also creates a lot of uncertainty. And maybe Rich, you'd like to follow it up, or Helen.
Rich or Helen, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah, Chris. I mean, I think that's a fair assessment. We will if the response tonight is we're not interested, when you come formally, it's unlikely that we'll get a variance. I think we're going to have to work with our team. We don't fully understand the process and whether or not that can be something the Plan Commission chooses to override or counsel. But the crux of the issue is it's too much of an investment for us to make in this vacant land, in this empty land, to take a chance that once we spend the $10 million on the roads, and that's not even including the acquisition cost of the parcel, to find out that there is no way to provide fire access for the 4 or 5 story building that we have planned, and we're limited to 2 stories. So, I mean, that would completely, ruin the project for us. So I don't think any of the principals of the development team would be interested in proceeding with that risk shifted onto the development team. It's not like we work with city staff and traffic and all parties for a long time on this plat and on these streets. So it's not just something that we drew up and said, hey, you know what, we understand those guidelines, but this is what we want. I mean, we have worked with them, we've modified things, we've worked with Bill Sullivan on these issues. So this represents in our mind the compromise that we, this is the compromise to go forward.
Thanks. And let me just say the way the ordinance is set up, the Transportation Commission makes a recommendation to the Plan Commission. And then I believe the Plan Commission makes a recommendation to the Common Council. So that's my understanding of the process. And certainly, okay. Tim, you can correct me if that's incorrect.
Nope, you've got that.
Okay. Are there other comments or questions? And sorry, I got booted out of Zoom for a minute there, but I was able to come back while somebody was talking. So yay. Any other comments or questions? Of the 4 from the development team right now? Okay, why don't we go to the rest of the public who's here? And then we'll open it up for general discussion and questions and get at some more of the issues that we've started talking about. Who else do we have, Aiden?
The next registrant is Tyler Krupp of Atwood Avenue, supports and wishes to speak, and is also representing Starkweather LLC.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
That's okay.
I'm sorry. I didn't realize somebody else was here from Starkweather.
That's okay. Everything I had to say was covered. I'll actually speak as a developer independent of Starkweather. I'm in support of some sort of resolution that provides clarity and a way forward for developers in general in Madison. Right now, it feels like there's a real sort of unresolved tension between complete green streets and the demands of fire access and fire apparatus coverage. And I think it's to all of our benefit if this compromise, something like this compromise approach is approved or is granted a variance, or more generally, if some policy level reconciliation of these 2 demands is worked out, so we all know how to move together or move forward on future projects. Thanks.
Thank you. Does anybody have a question for Tyler? Is there anybody else from the development team here, Aiden?
So there's more people from Starkweather registered as available for questions.
Okay. All right. Why don't we go to anybody else who's registered to speak?
Okay. So the next person is Lance Green of Dixon Street. Neither supports nor opposes, and wishes to speak. They're not part of Starkweather, or they
Okay.
don't have it listed.
Okay, Lance, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
We can.
Excellent. And thank you for such a good meeting that's happening here, the discussion of this topic. The things I have to say are somewhat about the transportation parts of it, and so a couple other questions that I really have with this design. I'm glad to see that in this picture, Chicago Avenue is not connected across Starkweather. I think that would be a bad idea. It would impose impacts on the creek, require the city to annex a resident's personal property. So I'm glad to see that question is put off to the future. Also, we have concern. Just to say, I'm the co-chair of the Friends of Starkweather Creek, so my concerns are for the creek, a large part of them, and also for public access to the parklands and the creek. So we have a Garver Pike path now terminating at Milwaukee Street. Is that going? I'm asking if it's going to be continued along Starkweather Creek. As it has been planned. It's not obviously shown on these developer maps, and that is one of the important aspects of transportation with this project, especially for access to people to the park. So that's a question I have. I hope it can be answered. And also the residents living to the west of Fair Oaks are going to want access to this park, and I'm thinking that could be provided by a bike ped bridge across the creek, more up or north of here near Webb or Furry Avenue, if that might be possible, as opposed to where the Chicago Avenue was going to go through. So those are two of the things about transportation. As a local resident, I'm concerned. I see what's going on there with all the pieces on Milwaukee Street. Right now, Milwaukee Street is kind of a crazy place to drive on and bike on. And now I'm seeing a lot of pieces on Milwaukee Street. I'd like someone to explain how Milwaukee Street is going to be changed so much. It looks like it's going to be one lane in each direction with turn lanes. Finally, I'd like a clearer explanation of the fate of the Starkweather Conservation Park and what existing and new land will be designated as park or greenway. Save the Farm and Friends of Starkweather worked with Dane County to obtain a $500,000 budget item to purchase land on the Voigt property with a conservation easement, matching the easement previously applied to the parkland for the city, which was obtained through the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Fund. It appears that part of that park, the part that extends to Milwaukee Street right now, is then going to be part of the development. And I would like clarity about that situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any of the commissioners or alders have a question for the speaker? Okay, I'm seeing no hands. Who else do we have, Aiden?
So the remaining registrants do not wish to speak, but so we have Emma Foe of Broadway Suite, Minneapolis, Minnesota, supports and is available for questions, representing the Starkweather Development Design Team. We have Jillian Hayes of East Washington Avenue, neither supports nor opposes, and is available for questions. They're representing Stonehouse Development, Inc. And Randy Kalinsky of Four-Year Drive supports and is available for questions. They're representing Starkweather, LLC. Thomas Price of West State Charles Road, Lombard, Illinois, supports and is available for questions, and they are the stormwater engineer for the project. Jeannie Kramer, North Fair Oaks Avenue, opposes and does not wish to speak. And Kellen Rice of East Washington Ave, neither supports nor opposes, does not wish to speak, and is representing Stonehouse Development.
Okay, so again, we've asked the development team to stay, if you don't mind, in case somebody does have a question down the road, unless anybody objects to that procedure. So what comments or questions do we have? Alder Martinez Rutherford, go ahead.
Is there a chance you might be able to show the sheet underneath this one? Because I believe that Chicago Extension is still listed as being there. Am I wrong?
No,
I don't know.
No, the preliminary plat will show the dedication of Chicago Avenue all the way to their property line at the center line of Starkweather Creek.
Thank you. I wanted to bring this up just because I know this has been a point of contention, especially since it will involve somebody's property. I want to say that the access, if you change it to a bike ped bridge, my understanding is that there will still need to be a negotiation of property for that individual living there. Am I wrong?
Who wants to field that? Chris, go ahead.
That is correct. We would have to purchase a smaller portion of a property if it was just a path only.
Could you maybe clarify for the rest of the group what you're talking about with regard to this particular homeowner's property?
So if you look on the top left of the screen there, where the purple kind of ends on Fair Oaks Avenue, there's that parcel there.
Mm-hmm.
So that is there is a current home on that parcel, and regardless if it was a path or a street, there would be some right-of-way requirement to purchase.
I'm not sure if I have another question right now, but
sure.
The connection to Chicago, also hitting the Darbo-Worthington area, feels like an equity issue for me, and I understand that it is involving someone's property, and I'm not trying to diminish that at all, but having access to that space and adding traffic calming to that road as it's designed would allow the community to get to the park easier and in a more equitable way, and access any services, work opportunities within that space. Additionally, having it cut off at the end, creating kind of a not a cul-de-sac, but could create a stagnation within the area. And I live near a space that was kind of similar to that, and prior to opening a bike ped bridge and an extension, there were a lot of people gathering there, doing things that weren't legal in that space. And so I believe that most of the concerns coming from that, as far as the speed, can be mitigated through traffic calming measures put into it. And I just wanted to make sure that, if not Chicago, that we have an access to the park that allows for the neighborhoods on the other side to get to that park easily and in a way that's safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I guess my overall assessment of this is a mess, where until recently we had a situation where new developments came to us, and because Complete Green Streets was not in place yet, we were obligated to approve these overly wide streets that we knew were problematic, but because ordinance had not been changed, we couldn't do anything about it. Now we're in a situation where the new policy is in place, but we're discovering that, well, actually, there are these conflicts that once again do not do not seem to allow us to build streets in a way that's consistent with the adopted policy because of things like fire access. And I think if that's the conclusion that we're going to draw from this, or that maybe if this were like all single family homes, maybe then we could have complete green streets. I mean, that's very much, I think, against the spirit of the policy, where the point is that no matter in what type of housing you live, and we need more housing, we need denser housing, you should still have access to complete and green streets. So that's kind of my overall takeaway from this. I would like to hear more from staff. I mean, I read your memo, which was really helpful, and I really appreciate that we have somebody from the fire department here. So I would like to hear some opinions on how can we resolve this. I very much get the developer's concern that if we say like, well, maybe we will approve it, maybe you can only build 2-story buildings, then we're not going to get the housing, I think. So yeah, I would like to hear more from staff on what is the resolution here. Do we need a policy change? Do we need an ordinance change regarding fire access requirements? But that's probably tied to the International Fire Code. But yeah, I would like to hear more about solutions to this tension that I've been describing.
I can jump in before we talk. I'm not going to talk about fire rules. So I think number one, it's interesting that our first one that comes forward is multi-story, which is a more complicated scenario, and brings up the fire apparatus in a way that if our first one was, more of a traditional single family home neighborhood, we wouldn't really have to have these conversations. I also think in Anne's chart, there is maybe just some differing thoughts on, is this a civic space versus a neighborhood yield street that may just be part of this process of both staff and developers and the committee kind of getting their head around what is the context that some of these are, right? Like a community main street versus a mixed use neighborhood street, right? Like that's maybe just a learning process and will become simpler. And yes, I think there could be some things that when we do our 18-month check-in and we're looking at what needs to be changed, we might have learned that there are some things like this that we want to address differently within the charts, within the parameters of complete and green streets. Or maybe we'll feel like we don't. Because this first one will teach us, who knows, that maybe it does work and we like people coming here and it's good to decide where we want to do the variances. And I would say, the developers have been working, these things take a long time, and obviously our charts came late in the process, and that probably impacts some of the thinking as well. So this is a little bit of a learning process for everyone. And now I will yield to, I'm not going to take any fire questions.
Perhaps, Bill, thank you for joining us. Maybe you can address Harold's comment, because that's, I think everybody has touched on this conflict between complete green streets, maximum travelway width that, is in conflict with the aerial apparatus access requirements. So if you're here, and thank you so much for coming to address that so that we can understand what alternatives there might be, or whatever you would like to say to us about the topic.
Sure, thanks for having me in. We don't typically get involved with the platting as much. Excuse me. But let's talk about fire access, aerial access when it's required.
The building code, fire code, International Building and Fire Code adopted by the state and also by the MGO 34 local ordinance.
Something happened to your mic, Bill. Something happened to your mic all of a sudden there.
You still there?
Now it's better. Thank you.
Sure, I'll talk a little louder and make sure I'm looking at the screen then. Sorry about that. But aerial access comes into play when a designer chooses to build a building with an eave height greater than 30 feet. So in many cases, that can be a 3-story apartment building that does not have to have aerial access. The rationale or reason for aerial access comes into play because our ground ladders maximum length 35 feet. By the time you actually deploy it at a climbable angle, it's probably right around 27, 28 feet. And so 30 foot was the number that has been established at the national level. So options that they have, typically they, if we in the past have said if it's plausible to make it work with the city's design of the city streets, we have allowed and accepted the public street to serve as aerial access. But at no point previously have we specifically incorporated the public street design to provide aerial access at the developer's request. Obviously, there's a lot of benefit from a planning perspective to be able to do that from a surface groundwater and less pavement option, but not necessarily a priority in the past from the city's perspective. The other options that the developers typically have is to provide the aerial access on their own property. So they could choose to build parking lots that incorporate aerial access and provide that from their element or from within their own property. We've done easements between two properties, or a type 2A construction, which is steel construction with that's protected. Aerial access is no longer required. So the codes have looked at trying to address that. And the real crutch of the thing is, if a building gets built, there's still an expectation that the fire department is going to provide services. And yes, we have experienced some issues with providing services to existing buildings in older neighborhoods that the street list didn't facilitate aerial access, and we had to kind of shoot from the hip and really delayed our ability to be able to safely extinguish a fire in an attic on a building downtown. So those are kind of our concerns. I can answer any specific questions anybody has specific to that, but it is very common for us to have conversations with development teams to establish other minimums or higher minimums on the building construction to offset aerial access needs, but it's on a case by case, parcel by parcel basis.
Okay, Harold, did that help answer your questions?
Yeah, it's a good starting point.
Okay, yeah, we have more for later. Chris, go. All right, Chris, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I was going to ask about some of those things, Bill, that you just talked about. What kind of construction and systems could, kind of offset the need for aerial access. So thank you. I won't ask you about that. I do have a handful of questions for staff, though. The first has to do with just platting in general. So maybe this is a question for Tim. I'm not sure, but so the first one regarding the Chicago extension. Does platting that extension right now have any impact on the owner of that house that it would affect?
In short, no.
Okay, thanks. And then also regarding platting, so it sounds like we're at a point where we're being asked to plat larger streets than we'd probably want to reduce the risk to the developers of needing to figure this out later. Assuming we do that, what does the path forward look like for continued negotiation about what the width finally looks like? Is there still room to figure this out if we plat it as is now?
That may involve Chris as well, because Complete Green Streets is pretty comprehensive, looking at street types, average daily trips that are anticipated, the travelway width, the right-of-way width. The plat's only going to establish the right-of-way width. However, that right-of-way width is informed by the anticipated travelway, and thank you, Sean. that would be put within that right of way, along with everything else, flex zone, walkway, etc. And so the course is being charted with the plat approval, and it's expected that what ultimately gets put in that right of way would follow the Complete Green Streets policy guide as well. But again, you're going to see the streets when the plans and specifications come through for the hopefully approved plat once we get to that point. But I'll leave my comments there and see if any of my colleagues have anything to add.
Renee, did you have something to add about that?
Sure. I mean, the actual street would come back. And so, obviously there's some opportunities for options to make, improvements to the street when it comes back further along. And I'll let Chris talk about when that is.
So if I could just clarify, so if we were to consider a wider street than we would like to, which Harold talked about earlier, in the actual street design, there could be bump outs or, other potentially even speed humps or other things that could assist with that. Is that kind of where you were headed, Renee?
Yes. Yeah. Those things would come later in the process.
Right. But would be available as an alternative. So anybody else on the Sean or anybody else, Chris, anybody else want to address? Oh, Chris, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm not sure if this is answering the question, but in this particular case, since the platting goes now and that establishes a wider street, there is always the opportunity for us to come back, with an individual developer agreement for a smaller street later, to build a smaller street. I think the one thing we couldn't do is say, okay, now we want a bigger street, because the once the plat is platted, the right of way is kind of set. So I don't know if that helps, but that was kind of one way I was thinking about your question.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
It's just something to add in there, and I think it relates to the table that Ann prepared, in particular for some of the lower order streets that they're seeking a pavement width that just isn't supported by Complete Green Streets by a factor of potentially 10 additional feet of width, both for the travel way and for the right of way. And so that's something that I don't know how much wiggle room we as a city have on that. And I think that's part of the decision that's before the Transportation Commission tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe Sean, you could show what that chart again and show what Tim was talking about. Yeah, where we have the 26 and the 16, that's pretty far apart. Is that where you were talking about, Tim? Okay. Anybody else?
Can I ask one
Yeah,
more?
go ahead.
That was what I was thinking. And then one more quick one, I think. Could someone just clarify? It sounds like this project is sort of opting into Complete Green Streets because it was initiated before this became, the rule of the land. Is that correct, or am I misinterpreting that?
Yeah, the subdivision was submitted prior to July 25th and the adoption of the new amended subdivision regulations. And so technically, they would be able to proceed under the old subdivision regulations, choosing street widths, pavement cross sections that would support the type of development that they are proposing in terms of needing that on-street aerial apparatus access.
Chris, are you interested in hearing from the development team? Therese has her hand up.
I'm not sure that would be appropriate actually at this point. I'll leave that to you, but I think that satisfies my
Okay.
question.
All right. I think we're good then. Did you have more, Chris? At this point? Okay. Alder Rummel, go ahead.
Thank you. I mean, sorry to do this, but I put my hand up and then a lot of people were before me. Back to just a quick question about the Chicago Street extension. When that visual was shown, it looked like the proposal from the developer didn't quite meet what was approved. Would that change be a parallel process? I mean, we would need to amend whatever we call it, the official mapped reservation at some point if some variation of what the developer proposes versus what was approved goes forward. Is that correct? And what would the timing of that be? I mean, obviously it was already stated that right now the property owner is, not like we're going to start acting on their property, but at some point it could, or the person would be willing to sell, et cetera. And then I have a separate question, but I'll wait for the quick answer.
Tim, Sean, Chris, who can answer that question? Oh, Tim, go ahead.
You're all so polite here at Transportation Commission. We just blurt out our answers at Plan Commission, but I figured I'd better raise my hand and be polite too. So back in March of 2021, Chicago Avenue, as it was planned in the Milwaukee Street Special Area Plan, was officially mapped by the Common Council. And so that extends across this site all the way from Fair Oaks and Chicago across the subject parcel, as well as some properties west of the creek. And then it actually is officially mapped as far as West Corporate Drive, east of the Voigt/Starkweather plat. So the subdivision regulations hold that if you have an officially mapped street on a property that you're going to subdivide, that you're going to dedicate that street consistent with the official mapping. The exhibit that you're seeing on the screen here is kind of informational or illustrative once you get to the center line of Starkweather Creek, because that is where it ceases to be the subject site. And so the directive that we gave the project team was to match up their Chicago dedication with the official mapped reservation at the center line of the creek. And so there's what's officially mapped, there's what the development team will be dedicating to the city and how that affects the property to the west. And right now, nothing is going to change. You can't dedicate a street on land that you don't own. There's actually two parcels between the center line of the creek and the center line of Fair Oaks Avenue that Chicago Avenue would have to cross in order to be extended. And so nothing west of the creek center line is formally before the Transportation Commission or the Plan Commission or the Common Council vis-a-vis the Starkweather plat. As far as the deviation that you're seeing, we do have a comment in some preliminary staff comments, and I believe we alluded to it in the report or the memo for Transportation Commission tonight, that we want to work with the development team to sort out that Leon Street extension, Chicago Avenue dedication, to have that dedication better reflect on this site what it or how it is officially mapped, how it was shown in that Milwaukee Street Special Area Plan. We've provided a rough outline of what that right-of-way dedication should look like. And note for the benefit of the commission and folks participating in the meeting, that how the street actually looks within that dedication may look a little bit different than the right-of-way. Usually the street lines and the sidewalks follow the right-of-way lines. They're parallel. In this case, there might be a little change of pace at the corner of Leon and Chicago, so that we get a dedication that reflects the plan, but also can design street intersection there that will work better for the project team. They've made that pretty clear to us in a recent meeting.
But that would be a separate process, I guess. The quick question in there.
The dedication is set by the plat. The street construction will come back through the Board of Public Works and TC process after the plat is approved.
Okay, thank you. And Tim, your last comments were really got me thinking, because before that I was really stuck on Pearl's point about, the complete green streets works great if we're just building single family homes, but what if we want to do something different? And then Tim, you mentioned, this, and I know the developers want to follow the complete streets. I think they support those goals, but you suggested they could opt, or maybe you're suggesting they could opt to follow the old law because that's when they applied. And if that were true, could they then get what they're proposing approved without going through a waiver, or is there other complications I'm not, aware of?
I'll jump in on that one. So I think, under the previous subdivision regulations, they would have similar issues. Typically these streets would all be 36-foot streets and 66-foot right-of-ways, parking both sides. So, they would have the 20-foot fire lane, but the 26 aerial apparatus would still be an issue for them, even with the old regulations. So, we haven't really removed parking for fire access before like that. So I think that's what the situation would be if they did go back to the previous subdivision regulations. I think they would have similar issues.
Not to turn this into the Parks Molloy debate of October 11th, but we've had, I think the old subdivision regulations provide a little more flexibility. There's also, sweeteners in terms of if it's a bike route, the street would be wider than 36 and a 66 under the old subdivision regulations. We talked a little bit earlier about Midtown Commons, Grandview Commons. Those are wider streets that in some cases are wider streets, in some cases not wider streets, but still had those buildings that required aerial apparatus access. So I think there's maybe more specificity with complete green streets that's coming to bear with this project than maybe you would have seen. Although to Sean's point, I mean, the old subdivision rules are not, a blank check, build whatever width of street you want, and you can have your on-street aerial apparatus access. My only contention would be that I think there'd be a little more flexibility to provide that compared to, the current regulations. And while I've got the microphone a point, I think it's important to make Milwaukee Street Special Area Plan was adopted in December 2018. We have a direction now with the adoption of Complete Green Streets to reflect the recommendations of Complete Green Streets in our future plans. And I think it's important to point out here that not just are we dealing with how a project does or does not comply with Complete Green Streets, but also a relatively recent plan that was adopted right before Complete Green Streets, relatively right before. It's of a recent vintage. Once we have area plans or neighborhood development plans that, take the intensity of development and really marry it with Complete Green Streets typology, we may not have this level of conversation on future plats because we will be thinking about, the intensity of development, where we want it, what sort of streets we need to serve it, with a mind for Complete Green Streets that we didn't have before Complete Green Streets when this special area plan was developed. So I thought that would be useful to mention within this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all for now.
Thanks, Alder. Alder Govindarajan, go ahead.
Thank you. I just taking a little bit of a step back here, I think. I'm still a little bit confused on what the immediate effects would be if we were. In my mind, I kind of see like two proposals here, if that makes sense. One to go with the Green Streets plan with the narrow roads, and then what the fire department is asking with the wider roads. And I am still trying to understand the immediate impacts of both. So can we just talk about that in kind of simple terms, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Hey, who's going to field that? Because that's the crux of the issue, isn't it?
Maybe, Sean, do you have that chart that Anne made again? Anne, thanks for the chart.
You like my chart. Excellent.
I do, right? Okay, so I'm going to need help from others, but I feel like there's two kinds of situations. One is where maybe the developers kind of have a vision and they chose a street type, and maybe staff felt like maybe we didn't quite see the same sort of context and vision, and it's a little bit different. So there's a couple of those, like the neighborhood shared street versus neighborhood yield street, civic space, community main street versus mixed use neighborhood street, right? Those are maybe where we didn't quite get the vision and the context and the details with the same street type. And then there's where we agree on the street type. So where we all agree we think it's a neighborhood street, but it's a street where they would like to have some assurance that it could meet the need for aerial apparatus, the sort of fire requirements. And Tim, Sean, others, you love to correct me, so you can jump in.
And in order to do that, they would need to exceed the maximum width per complete green streets, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so this is kind of the table that shows it. So, we're talking, all these streets, they're going to be under 3,000 vehicles per day. Maybe if the Chicago connection goes through, maybe it would be over 3,000, but today they'll be 3,000. So that's kind of where we're getting the total travelway width is from this table. So that's where the table Ann put together, that's where we're getting the 22 and the 16 as the as the max travelway width. So that's kind of the I guess the conflict that we're trying to resolve, through a variance, or I guess not through a variance. Is that they're requesting that these max travelway widths be 26, and that I guess required a variance. So that's kind of roughly what we're dealing with here, I guess, put in simple terms.
Who is it? The developers requesting that to be at 26, or the fire department?
It's the developer.
Okay. And then when it comes to the fire department's request, at least I believe it is the fire department's request, correct? To kind of make sure that the roads are a little bit wider so the fire trucks can get in, essentially.
It's one of the ways they can meet their fire needs. I don't think the fires, Bill can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think fire is requesting that the streets be 26 feet in width, but it is one of the options they have to meet their requirements for aerial apparatus.
That would be correct. The fire department is not requesting street width. We end up having to react to the proposal for development to build taller than 30 feet, and then typically they can provide it on their own property. We'll plan ahead and do some other things. So we are not specifically making a request for 26-foot wide streets.
So would it be possible to stick with the green streets, more narrow streets, and the fire trucks will still be able to get in, and there's no big safety concern on that side, correct?
We will be able to get fire trucks into there. We will have difficulty, or it may be impractical to set up our ladder trucks to be able to use ladders from the exterior to get to upper floor levels above 30 feet, or to get to the roof if we need to cut holes for ventilation that allows us to do our job more efficiently on the inside by removing the heat and smoke.
Okay, thank you.
So it does impact our ability. Does not necessarily completely take us out of the picture, but it does make it more challenging.
Okay, thank you. I think those are my questions for now.
Okay, thanks, Alder. Chris, go ahead.
Sorry, I realize I've already spoken, but I wanted to reflect on the situation and sort of, I think, answer Alder Govindarajan's question a little bit. I think the situation we're in is that the developer wants a path forward, and they foresee that the fire department will likely want 26-foot lanes down the road. And in order to solidify that, that's what the plats will be designed around. And what we're being asked to do now is sort of give some sort of assurance that when the time comes, we will allow them to stray from the Complete Green Streets guide. Now, I'm not sure this needs our approval right now. Maybe someone can clarify that. So what we're being asked to do is just sort of put our stamp on, yes, at some point down the road, if it comes to this, we will allow the widths that are wider than Complete Green Streets. I'm happy to speak to that and make a motion. I'm not sure that we're even in a position to give that assurance because, the commission could change. And, so I kind of am at a loss at what to do. But I am happy to make a motion to move this along if that's what's helpful.
Chris, let me just clarify. What I believe the Transportation Commission is being asked to do tonight is, in order to move the preliminary plat forward, we're being asked to make a recommendation to the Plan Commission on which you sit. So you'll see this again at the Plan Commission, as to whether we're willing to recommend a variance to Complete Green Streets, which is what would be required. And when there is a variance from Complete Green Streets, the Transportation Commission is required to make a recommendation to the Plan Commission per that new ordinance. So we are being asked to make a recommendation one way or the other tonight. Is that correct, Sean and Tim?
Yes.
Does that help, Fred?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to wait till after Alder Harrington McKinney speaks before you make a motion? Okay. Alder, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. And what Chris said is absolutely correct, is that there are changes, there could be changes on the Transportation Commission, there could be changes on planning, there could be changes in terms of the alders as well. And with so much discussion, I'm really not clear, and I know the developers are still online. I'm still not clear whether making this recommendation actually I don't want to say confirms, but making this recommendation to move forward. How can we, is it possible to put some kind of caveat on the end where this absolutely happens? I mean, we're saying this today, but what happens down the road? And that's the thing that, and I don't want to circle back because we've been discussing this quite a long time. And it just reminds me from when District Fire Station number 7 was traveling down Gammon Road to get to Jeffrey Trails, there was a discussion, a lengthy discussion about turnaround time and access, and all of those things came up in the discussion at the council level, and it was a very intense discussion. So I don't know if we've gotten there yet. I don't want to travel over it again, but my question is that when we make the recommendation, and Chris, when you make the recommendation, are we comfortable in saying that this variance is something that we strongly support? And if that's the case, how do we frame that when it goes to the Planning Commission?
Yeah, I think, Alder, you've hit on it. I believe that we would be asked to make a motion, which would then go to the plan commission. And Tim, help me here to make sure that I'm saying this correctly. So, but the Transportation Commission isn't making a decision, we're just making a recommendation. Then the Plan Commission makes a recommendation to the Common Council. Then the Common Council approves the preliminary plat. Am I right, Tim?
Yes. I mean,
Okay. I met with them for an hour earlier so that I could have this all straight before we got here tonight. So we're not approving anything tonight. We're making a recommendation to the Plan Commission, who then in turn considers that recommendation in making their recommendation to the Common Council.
And are we making a strong recommendation? That's what I'm asking.
That's up to the commission. That is up to us to decide. Yep. That is up to us to decide, Alder. However we frame it.
And I would just recommend to the members of the Transportation Commission the two highlighted passages on page 3 of the memo that speak to, in this case, any subdivision that proposes to deviate from the design standards in the Complete Green Streets Guide. The Plan Commission shall consider the recommendation of the Transportation Commission before taking action on such subdivision. And under the variance section in the subdivision regulations, for any request to waive or vary the requirements for transportation facilities shown in a subdivision, the Plan Commission may consider the recommendation of the Transportation Commission. Consideration shall be given to whether the transportation facility required can be accommodated in another way. So those are the two, salient passages for the Transportation Commission as they consider how they'd like to recommend to the Plan Commission on the platted street widths.
Does that help answer your question, Alder?
It answers my question, and I'm glad that it lands on Chris to make that motion. But from the conversation, I hear that, and this is what I'm hearing, is that our commission is recommending it, but I wanted to make sure that language of recommendation has some semblance of how we are. That we're strongly recommending it, or we're just recommending it. It's all in the language, and
right.
All in the language and how it's crafted and how it goes to the Planning Commission. I know that it is their final decision, but it really is how we craft it and how we send it to how they may receive it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely agreed. And what we recommend is up to the members of the Transportation Commission and how we vote. Is that all you had, Alder, or did you wish?
That's it.
Okay. Chris.
I'm ready to take a crack at it.
Okay. I'm ready to write.
I move that we recommend the platting and support deviation from Complete Green Streets only if it is required to meet fire code.
Okay, so what I have one second. Move that the Transportation Commission recommend to the Plan Commission. Is it okay to put that in there, Chris?
Yep.
Recommend to the Plan Commission the platting and support the platting as proposed.
No,
but as proposed by the applicant. That's the question.
Well, so there's a difference between platting and street design.
Right, but the chart that I put together shows that the applicant is proposing one thing and staff is proposing something else. So my question is, are you moving that the platting as proposed by the applicant or as recommended by staff? You see what I'm saying, Chris?
Oh, No, the plating as proposed by the applicant.
Okay. Thank you. It's very, very complicated. And of course, we
Can I
got
say
the
that
most.
again?
Yeah,
So-
I'll read it. You go ahead and say it again, or I can read you what I have.
So that we recommend the plating proposed by the applicant.
Okay. So
And
move
we
that the trans. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think it's important that we distinguish between plating and street design right now.
Oh, right. We're talking about the preliminary plat. That's correct. Yep, absolutely. Would you prefer that we say the preliminary plat as proposed so that it's clear what we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. Let me read what I have and then you can tell me how you might like to change it. Move that the Transportation Commission recommend to the Plan Commission the preliminary plat as proposed by the applicant and support deviation. And so the TC supports deviation from complete green streets only if it is required to meet fire code.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Alder Martinez Rutherford.
I would second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Chris, did you wish to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Okay.
It's obviously a confusing situation. That sort of sets off a chain reaction of things. Everyone here agrees, I think, that we want narrower streets that conform with complete green streets. And this sets a bad precedent and feels like a failure of complete green streets. And this is not the first time that fire department has overridden Transportation Commission. Another example would be speed humps. So this feels like an urgent, there's an urgent need to reach an agreement on this stuff. So that's, I think, an issue for another day. We keep giving up safety in the name of safety, it feels like. And we definitely don't want to see people building smaller buildings because they're afraid that they're not going to be able to meet complete green streets. So these are all things we need to address at somewhat later time. It does sound like to me the developers have a cohesive vision for these streets, that even if they are wider, there's an eye for how to design them in a way that feels nice, is walkable and all that. And I think the developers believe in complete green streets. That's why they sort of opted to take this route and wanted narrower streets. It just turned out that they ran into this issue that we're now all facing right now. I think the big picture is that as much as we would like to see these streets narrower at some point, that's not as important as our larger transportation goals. Like, I don't want to give up these streets, the size of these streets, for the fact that we will potentially get a lot of development in a transit-oriented, high capacity transit area where we really need the development to meet our housing and transportation goals. So I think that's the question in front of us right now and why I think we need to approve this. And I think it's clear that this is creating a path forward and not necessarily deciding on the final complete design, although I'm not super hopeful that we're going to get the streets we want, but there is still time to work through that. So.
Thank you, Chris. Alder Rummel, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. I think the last part of the motion is the one that's getting stuck in my brain, because I thought we heard from Bill Sullivan that, they're not requiring things, but you're adding something about having to meet fire code requirements. So I just want to make sure that you're just speaking to what you need to speak to move forward with this. The thing I heard as a policymaker that I think is key is that in the past, we haven't designed streets for fire access. We've required that on a parcel basis for new buildings. And as a person who's served off and on for years on urban design, I've witnessed the role of fire and how, buildings are designed on each parcel. But we're at the preliminary plat level. We're not at the parcel level. And if we want to have a new way of building streets, I think we should just stick with the front end of the motion, which is to recommend this plating as proposed, and then see where it goes as for future policy. It's because it's not going to stop here. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Alder Harrington McKinney, go ahead.
Yes, and where I'm comfortable for moving this forward, and thank you, Alder Rummel, is that this was prior to July the 25th. I know that I heard that several times in terms of when Complete Green Streets was approved. This applicant came in prior to that, and so going forward, if the plan is to have narrow streets and we can move toward that, but this exception is because, number one, it came in prior to the acceptance and the approval of Complete Green Streets. So I see a pathway forward, and I'd be comfortable with if another developer came in and said, we want this. We have a pathway forward where we can say our goal for the city of Madison is to have narrow streets. So I'm very comfortable with us moving forward with this applicant, and it's up to and I know that there are others that are more experienced than I, whether you want to take off the last part of it relating to fire access.
Thanks, Alder Harrington McKinney. Alder Govinda, was that all you had? I'm sorry, Alder Harrington McKinney. Okay, Alder Harrington McKinney, is that all you had?
Yes, that's all I had.
Okay, Alder Govindarajan, go ahead.
Thank you. I just have one more quick question, if that's okay.
Sure.
Will the wider streets at all affect how many units will be built? Because I understand that there is supposed to be a decent amount of affordable units built in this proposal as well. And that's something that I care about a little.
Tim, you want to address that, or Sean? Or Chris? Or Renee?
Well, the number of units you build is at least a partial consequence of the size of the building. And the project team is representing that they'll be able to build taller buildings on wider streets and presumably have more units than they would in buildings that were not as tall because of the limitations on aerial apparatus access. They've represented that they're going to design the project, or they're anticipating about 1,100 units. They've represented that some of those will be affordable. I believe roughly 200 of up to 1,100, with the rest being market.
Okay, thank you.
Carl, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Chris, for making the motion and speaking to it. I think that really summarized the situation. I think for me, I'm really uncomfortable moving forward just because I don't think, this is going to keep happening, and there is not going to be a resolution unless we change policy in some form or shape. And I'm really uncomfortable with saying this only applies because the building is large, because the consequence then is that the people who live in those buildings don't get the same safety benefits as if we had a single family home subdivision. And I think that's really, really problematic. I'm still really conflicted on what to do about it, because the outcomes here are seemingly either that we will have less housing, fewer housing units, or we will have housing units, but streets that are not as safe for the people living in those housing units. And so personally, I'm not totally sure how to resolve that conflict. Ultimately, we're making a recommendation to the Plan Commission. but yeah, I think maybe the bottom line for me is this is really something that needs to be resolved at the policy level, and we need to start working on it as soon as we can to resolve this, because we have travelway widths that are not even 20 feet. And I mean, coming back to Harvey Street, when we talked about the previously approved Harvey Street, we needed to have 20 feet. Like, it couldn't be a neighborhood yield street, because according to what was conveyed from the fire department, well, they needed 20 clear feet of street width. And so this is an unresolved problem. And yeah, I'm kind of out of my wits how to fix this, but let's try and fix it. Thanks.
Yeah, I don't see any other hands up, so I'm going to make a couple comments. I've thought about this a lot and discussed it at length with staff today, and there is a conflict. A tension was one of the applicants, representatives of the applicants called it a tension between complete green streets and potentially fire access requirements. And Renee, this is on her radar and certainly something that we'll need to think about and potentially address. I do like having, if it's required to meet fire code in the motion, because that tells the Plan Commission why we're in agreement with that, understanding that there might be alternative means available to meet the fire access requirements, but that those alternative means may or may not be cost effective in a manner that would allow the developer to build those 1,000 housing units and potentially 200 of them being affordable. So that's what I see as the reason why it would be possible to support it. Bearing in mind, and this will be the end of my comments, that this is not the street design, that, as Chris Pedikowski said earlier, we could always try for narrower streets when we get to the final design phase. And as Renee pointed out, we could add some other traffic safety improvements to these wider streets than we would have hoped to make them safer for the residents of those streets. So Harald, that was my way of balancing this preliminary path forward, recognizing that we will have a voice, Transportation Commission will have a voice later on relative to the street design and any potential traffic safety improvements that might be needed because of the width of those streets. So, other comments or questions? Are we ready for a vote, or do people need more time to discuss? And would you like a roll call vote if we do? We have 10 people here, so 6 votes would be needed to pass the motion. Are we ready to vote? Okay. Do we want a roll call vote, or are we willing to go for a unanimous consent vote? I've sensed that some folks were conflicted. Would we like a roll call vote? Denise?
And can you read the motion one more time?
You bet. So Chris moved that the Transportation Commission recommend to the Plan Commission the preliminary plat as proposed by the applicant and support the deviation from the complete green streets only if it is required to meet fire code. Are we ready to vote? Why don't we have a roll call vote, just because this seems appropriate in this particular case to document where we are. Alder Govindarajan?
Can I propose a small amendment to that motion? At the very end where it says only if required to abide by fire code, can it instead say only if it's only if it is absolutely required. Because I know earlier there was some confusion on whether fire code actually requires it or not, and Alder Rummel brought this up earlier as well. So just that small distinction might actually help Plan Commission focus on that bit a little bit further.
Is there a second to that motion? And the Alder is suggesting that we add absolutely, as opposed to it's required to meet fire code, it's absolutely required to meet fire code. Is there a second to that motion? I'm not seeing a second, Alder. Okay, Alder Bennett? Can't hear you, Alder. Was that a second, Alder Bennett?
Second.
Okay, so there's a motion on the table to amend the original motion to add the word absolutely. So it would read, move that the Transportation Commission recommend to the Plan Commission the preliminary plat as proposed by applicant and support deviation from complete green streets only if it is absolutely required to meet fire code. So, I'm going to try it's a unanimous consent vote on the amendment. If you are opposed, please raise your hand. And if there's a bunch of hands that go up, we'll do a roll call. I'm seeing hands. We're going to do a roll call vote on the amendment. And we need 6 votes to pass the amendment. So Aiden, go ahead. I'm sorry, Aiden, could you repeat that?
Juliana Bennett.
You're real soft, Aiden.
Here, let me grab my mic really quick.
You're better. That's much better.
okay.
Much better. Much better.
Thanks. Juliana Bennett.
Alder Bennett, we can't hear you. You're muted.
Aye.
MGR Govindarajan.
Aye.
Dina Nina Martinez Rutherford.
Can you come back to me?
Barbara Harrington McKinney.
No.
Robbie Weber.
No.
Denise Jess.
No.
Darren Wozniewski.
No.
Chris McCahill.
No.
Bill Bremer.
No.
And Harold Kleems.
No.
So Alder, your vote won't make a difference. Alder Martinez Rutherford.
No. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yep. That the amendment has failed. So we're back to the original motion. Do you want me to read it again? Why don't I, just to make sure we're on the same page? Chris made the motion that the Transportation Commission recommend to the Plan Commission the preliminary plat as proposed by the applicant and support the deviation from complete green streets only if it is required to meet fire code. Okay, so let's do a roll call vote on the motion.
So Juliana Bennett.
Aye.
MGR Govindarajan.
Aye.
Dina Nina Martinez Rutherford.
Aye.
Barbara Harrington McKinney.
Aye.
Robbie Weber.
Aye.
Denise Jess.
Aye.
Darren Wozniewski.
No.
Chris McCahill.
Aye.
Bill Bremer.
Aye.
And Harold Kleems.
Aye.
I came up with 9-1 in favor. Is that what you have, Aiden?
Yep.
Okay, so the motion is carried. Now, big takeaway, Renee, you have the big takeaway, which is the policy issue. Obviously, important for us to discuss. And I think we made some great headway in the discussion that we had tonight. Don't you think, Renee?
Yeah, I think this was really good.
Madam Chair, would you confirm the vote?
I'm sorry, it was not, I believe I said it's 9-1 in favor.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
Yep, no, 9-1 in favor. The motion is carried. Go ahead, Renee.
No, I was going to say, I think this was a good discussion, lots of good points. And, you know, we have our 18-month check-in plan, which would not be till next year, but we can obviously work this into the agenda for some additional discussion as well. So I know, Anne, you've got that noted already, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think, Bill, we would, appreciate having, since this whole fire access issue is something that is really at the heart of what we'd be talking about, it's really helpful to have that contact with the fire department, and may need to ask you to come back so that we can have further discussions.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks so much, everybody. Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that the Office of the City Attorney is hiring a new agency attorney who's handling police and fire issues. I think he starts on the 16th. So this is something that I'll put on his radar. I know that, and there's so many other good staff already working on it, but just wanted to mention that to commission members as a point of information.
Okay, great. All right, really great discussion, and thanks so much, everybody, for the feedback there. Anything else on that one last item? Darren, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to be appropriate just to share. I'd hope maybe for our policymakers that are on this board, we start looking at maybe adopting a policy within the city about right-sizing equipment. Too often we're told we can't do something because of plows. We can't do something because of the size of fire trucks. There's a way to buy the right equipment to make this work, to get what we need. And I think maybe we start looking at longer term, bringing that all in line.
Alders, are you taking notes? Thank you. That's a great suggestion. That is on the traffic calming subcommittee, Darren. We had a lot of discussion about other cities and some of the, Harold, you remember some of those conversations, Chris, and others, and Bill, that we had with regard to that very same issue. So excellent point, and certainly something that is a different way to look at it. Okay. Anything else before we move on? Again, thanks so much for the excellent discussion. Next we have number 10, Chris, that's the 2024 list of public works transportation projects.
Yes. So I'll probably keep this kind of brief. It's already 8:30. Generally in the past, this time of year, our budget is, proposed by the mayor, and we kind of have finalized the list of streets that we are going to be resurfacing and reconstructing in the next year. And, depending on how the budget shakes out in November, it'll be fairly close to the list that I provided in the agenda, and I'll share that real quick. So, in the past, I've kind of used this as like a kind of almost like a mini work plan for which projects are going to come before the TC and which ones, we kind of don't think we'll need to. Now with Complete Green Streets, it's a little different. So in the past, we targeted, arterial streets, collector streets, and bike paths. any kind of priority sidewalk components, those definitely all came to TC for a recommendation. Now the way the language sits is, if it's similar to the plat situation. If the street meets complete green streets, we don't have to come before the TC to, get your approval and move. We could just kind of take those projects straight to BPW and get them approved that way, for bidding and construction. So now it's a little different. I can't just, single out the arterials and collectors and priority sidewalks. We kind of have to see how the projects develop. So I don't have a exact list of I have the list of projects, of course, but I don't have the ones that I know for sure that are going to be before you, because we got to kind of go through the public meetings, get the proposed designs, and then work from there. So I think what, this will kind of be this first year, we'll kind of see how we go, and we'll definitely err on the side of caution and bring things that are I guess maybe more in doubt if they fully meet complete green streets or not. If there's some no doubters, we'll just take those straight to board and kind of proceed like that, and we'll kind of see how it goes this year. And like, for instance, some projects, like, for instance, Doncaster, Beverly, Danbury, I already know is a very similar tree issue that we have on Harvey Schmidt. And, the street design may suggest that it needs sidewalks, and that meets complete green streets. But if you do that by killing 70 trees, that probably doesn't meet complete green streets. So it's going to take a little bit of there's some gray areas. I'll just put it that way. So we'll definitely bring the gray ones here, and get a feel for kind of how the process is working, and we'll all get better at it, I'm sure. So I don't have a distinct list here of which are coming and which are not. I kind of some of them that we've already came before, so I indicated that, like Lake Mendota Drive, for instance, Harvey Schmidt, Blue Harvest Lane. And then, the other ones I listed as an informational item and noted kind of at the bottom that, plan to come for TC for informational presentation, may not need if project meets CGS. So, that's kind of, these are a listing of the projects to kind of expect for the city to build, assuming everything stays on budget and all our designs go on time, which is usually not always the case. They're lumped into clusters by the color. So, Lowell Street is on its own, Lake Mendota Drive is on its own, but Doncaster, Beverly, and Danbury will bid those together because it's kind of a clump of streets and it makes sense. And we'll get some bidding efficiencies that way. So those are the reconstructs and the resurfacings. I also included a tip map in Legistar and in your agenda, so you can kind of check them out. If you have any questions, definitely reach out to us. And that tip map's on our website always as well. It gets updated routinely. So that's all I had for a presentation on the 2024 street lists right now.
So it'll be a learning process this first year. Anybody have any questions for Chris? Okay, thanks much, Chris, and we'll obviously stay in touch as we go throughout the year.
All right, thank you.
Yes, thank you. So 11 is our crossover reports from members of the Transportation Commission who are also members of other boards, committees, and commissions. And many of you are members of others. Anybody have anything to report into TC tonight? Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, just real quick. TDM in parking and questions about whether they can provide sidewalks. So just like we saw tonight, we're seeing the effect of policies play out on projects across the city. So.
Okay, is that all you had, Chris? Okay, Alder Harrington McKinney, go ahead.
The MPO met on October the 4th, and it was one of our quickest meetings. I think we were adjourned in less than an hour. But there were like the 5 points that I want to bring out is that the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program funding applications, there are now before us. The second one is they adopted the 2024-2028 transportation improvement for the Madison metropolitan area and Dane County. Approval to release the draft 2024 MPO Unified Planning Work Program. Revised a draft of the 2024 MPO budget, and finally the status report on the Capital Area Regional Planning Council. That's a summary of what we talked about.
Okay, thank you so much, Alder.
Anybody?
Yeah, thank you. Anybody have anything else to report? No? Okay, then we'll move on to announcements from the chair. The doodle poll went out to the Transportation Commission members with regard to the social gathering. And there's a separate poll that went out to staff as well. When I looked this afternoon, about an hour before the meeting, we'd heard from 6 TC members. And so if you haven't already, please complete the poll. November 30th at 5:30 is the most popular date so far. They're all at 5:30, but November 30th is the most popular so far. October is really not popular. November is more popular. So would it be helpful for Aiden to send out an email with a link to the doodle poll again to the group, so anybody who hasn't done it already? So Aiden, if I could ask you to just shoot out a reminder to the TC members, and if they haven't already filled it out, Alder Harrington McKinney?
Can we give our confirmation now to Aiden, or do we have to have it, does he have to send it to us again?
Well, I'm sorry, I'm confused.
No, you said that he would send out the link and we would confirm what date works. I mean, if I know that now, can I give that information, or should I wait and he receive the link?
Well, you certainly can tell us if you'd like.
So November the 30th at 5:30 works.
Okay. Is that the only date that works for you, Alder Harrington McKinney?
Well, maybe he needs to send it out. So I don't want it to get lost in my email, so that's why I was responding now. But if he sends it out, it'll be at the top, and then I'll respond. Thank you.
Okay. All right. That would be great. Robbie?
I was just going to say I found the original link by just looking for Doodle in my email. So that's one way to find it and then be able to answer it.
Okay. All right. And Aiden will send it back out, but searching for Doodle in your email is a great way that's how I find it, to check to see if who's filled it out and stuff. So anyway, we're making progress there, and we'll keep you posted on that as well. That was the only announcement that I had tonight. terms of future agenda topics, we have a lot coming. October 25th, potentially parking garage rate changes, crossing guard. Aiden already sent you the link, so it's out there for you. Crossing guard policy assignment and modifications, approval of the TC annual work plan, which I may defer if it looks like the meeting is going to be long, because the north-south bus rapid transit and north-south bus rapid transit public involvement plan are both proposed for the October 25th agenda. E-bike speeds and speed policy on shared use paths, quarterly traffic safety report, Bikeways 2024, update on budget, and, more coming on November 8th, including, I would just comment on the fact that one of them that items we have in November is an update on the Metro Transit accessibility and paratransit, which addresses one of the topics that was brought forward to us tonight. So anybody have any other agenda items? Alder Govindarajan.
Thank you. We had a speaker talk earlier today about, I would like to add an agenda item on pedestrian accessibility with, I don't know exactly how the speaker phrased it. I can't remember. It was like several hours ago, but some of you remember it. It was essentially pedestrian accessibility when you're walking, kind of like having those speaking things at light stops and stuff like that. However you want to phrase that onto an agenda.
Okay, so pedestrian, so it was Denise.
Accessible pedestrian signals in.
That's awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Because Denise has been working with him. So accessible pedestrian signals. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. All right. All right. We will add that as a topic. Harold?
Yeah, just a suggestion to potentially combine that topic with something that I think Bill had suggested a couple meetings ago with the changes in PROAC, like the guidance on public right-of-way accessibility guidelines. I mean, it's a slightly different topic, but it might make sense to combine those two.
Yes, I have that on we have two lists going. I have a general future topics list, and then we have the the projects and the referrals from the council on our to-do list for every meeting. So Harold, I'll take a look at that item that Bill had suggested and you had wanted added as well, and see if we can combine those two together.
And this is Denise. Sorry for not raising my hand. It's too late to find the key command. I would just highly recommend that. There's really not a lot of substantive information about accessible pedestrian signals. I mean, it's something Renee and I could probably present on in 5 minutes. So I think kind of putting that into what is the pedestrian safety infrastructure things that really make a difference, and that PROAG changes, I think that makes sense there because it's part of the universe. It's not a fix in itself to have an accessible pedestrian signal.
Okay, I'll just tack on at the end of that, including accessible pedestrian signals, just so we don't lose sight of that. And you can convey that we have added that to our list of future agenda topics. So, excellent.
Yeah, no problem.
Great. Thank you so much, Denise. Anything else? Okay, we covered a lot of ground tonight. So thank you so much. Oh, I need a motion to adjourn. Geez, I can't forget that. Who wants to? Harold.
Move adjournment.
Okay. And Robbie seconds. Okay, I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote. I was in such a hurry, I was just going to leave. I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.